Call to order this District of Clearwater regular council meeting for Tuesday, April 14th, 2026 at 1-ish p.m. I'd like to begin by acknowledging we are fortunate to be gathering together on the unceded territory of the Simpcw First Nation, who have been caretakers of this land since time immemorial. There is one late item, which is on table that will go as 16-4, grant application DOC. Okay, so we'll add that. Can I get a mover for the agenda, adoption of the agenda with the late item? So Councillor Matheson moves, seconded by Councillor McKenzie. All those in favor? That'll be 16-4. Adoption of the agenda. Okay, we've already done that. Sorry. Any declared known conflict of interest or pecuniary interest that anybody would like to declare on this one? Seeing none. Move on to TNRD Director sent an email. Moving on to delegations. CBC grant application, project summary, and request for letter of support. Chamber of Commerce. Whenever you're ready, come up to the podium, state your name, and fire away.
Hello, my name is Cheryl Thomas. I live at 68 Cameron Road. I'm the Vice Chair for the Chamber of Commerce locally. We've requested this this delegation, and therefore I am here on behalf of the Chamber of Commerce to request a letter of support for our ETSI-BC grant application and to briefly outline the project's regional economic development objectives. The ETSI-BC program, as you know, encourages collaboration and shared capacity. This delegation is brought forward in that spirit. ETSI-BC provides supports initiatives that strengthen local economies and workforce resilience. The program accepts multiple applications within a region and explicitly favors collaboration approaches between organizations and local governments. This creates an opportunity for the Chamber to lead a project while working constructively with the district. The Chamber proposes their project focuses on supporting local businesses and workforce development, strengthening regional economic resilience, and coordinating efforts to reduce duplication. The project remains within Chamber's mandates of economic development and business support. It does not involve policy advocacy, enforcement, or adjudication disputes. The Chamber's work in economic development has evolved over time, and we recognize that roles and expectations benefit from ongoing dialogues. This project is focused on coordination and capacity building, and we are open to exploring how roles can be clarified collaboratively while moving forward. Collaboration and capacity. This is our offer. We recognize that municipalities face capacity restraints when participating in grant-funded initiatives. As part of this project, the Chamber is willing to assume administrative and reporting responsibilities, manage grant compliance and deliverables, and therefore reduce administration burden on the district staff. Any collaboration would be voluntary and defined at a level Council is comfortable with. Letter of support, as you know, between pages 7 and 10, we have requested this. With the context of collaboration and capacity building, the Chamber is respectfully requesting a letter of support from Council for this BC ETSI application. The letter would acknowledge awareness of the project and the Chamber's willingness to collaborate with the district. It does not require the Council to take a position on unrelated matters or commit the district to financial or operational obligations. This request is made in the spirit of cooperation and regional benefit. Regardless of the outcome, the Chamber remains committed to working constructively with the district to support local economic resilience. Thank you. I am open to questions.
Thank you. Any questions from council on this? Go ahead, Councillor Herring.
I may have missed this, but how much are you guys applying for from the grant?
I believe we sent our application to you. It's 25 even?
It's actually
It's small scale, 25,000.
at the end. It's in a letter in the last section. Correspondence, probably the last second or third page, I think.
Oh, okay.
Your agenda package.
And just as a follow-up, how many staff does the Chamber of Commerce currently
None.
have? Okay, so this grant be intended to support the staff capacity to implement it as well?
The pass,
Like the money that you're applying for would be used towards getting the staff capacity to complete the work as well, correct?
we will hire
Consultant
someone.
or someone internally?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Thank you.
Further questions? It actually wasn't in there, so, yeah. Okay. Okay, further questions? If not, thank you for your presentation. It comes up, this item for decision comes up later in the agenda under item, 18.1, so,
It's a ways.
yeah.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, you
or
absolutely
two?
can.
I'm just wondering about, if you could clarify for me the criteria used when deciding whether to provide letters of support for grant applications, particularly when multiple organizations are applying for part of the same money
So, the criteria for
for making the
judging
decision.
on, making a decision on multiple grant applications, letters of support. Do we have a policy on that, Mr. Johnson? Off the top of your head?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't believe that we have a policy per se on what happens. The interesting issue with this grant is the district is putting in for a grant application to the same pot. And some municipalities have policies which says we will not support grants that are competing with municipal grants. Other municipalities have a policy which is more or less hands off, let the deciders decide, the grant deciders. So, but I don't believe, and we've had a little bit of discussion that we have a specific policy around that or how we choose the grants that we favor or not grant. So in lack of a policy, then I would say it would be whichever one we feels best fits our strategic initiatives and our achieving our strategic goals.
Councillor Sim, go
Just
ahead.
on that, because you do have a letter of support from the Area A director, the letter primarily speaks about the district initiatives, but I'd like to think that where your proposal is for the broader valley. Am I making that correct assumption?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thus, the TNRD grant writer has been assisting us.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Okay, if no, oh, go ahead, Councillor, sorry to demote you.
promotion,
Go ahead,
yay.
Mr. CEO Johnson.
Thank you. So just to clarify a comment that was made earlier, the actual decision on supporting for this grant would come at a future council meeting because we don't make decisions at the same meeting that a delegation makes a
Okay,
request
so I was wondering,
for
so
council.
that extra letter at the end is additional correspondence?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so it actually gets made at a future council meeting, the next council meeting, so.
I just love these council meetings. You'll see me at the next one as
Yeah,
well.
yeah, no problem.
And don't worry, we can send in the letter after we have sent in our application,
Yeah.
which, by the way, the deadline is or was, because this letter didn't get through to council in time for the last meeting. Thank goodness, because it was already very long.
Okay.
So, thank you.
And thank you. And just for absolute transparency here, I am a member of what's called the ETSI-BC RAC, which is the Regional Advisory Committee, which actually decides on grants. In the event that this should go forward in any form that you should submit, I will recuse myself at that meeting from any discussion or decision on that grant.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, thank you for your presentation.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Moving on to minutes of the regular council meeting held March 31st, 2026. Are there any errors or omissions? If not, can I get a mover and a seconder on that? Moved by Councillor Herring, seconded by Councillor Matheson. Further discussion? There's no discussion. All those in favor? And that passes. Thank you. Nothing under development zoning, unfinished business, public or statutory. Mayor's report, I'm going to keep it brief because I was going to try to do this yesterday, but became very ill. Two things that have come up in the last couple weeks since the last council meeting. Attended the community forum in Valemount last week for a night and a day. Absolutely fabulous event. Definitely left you with a lot of hope. I'm quite sure that other councillors there will have some reports and comments on that one. But yeah, it was an absolutely great experience. Very well attended. I think the vast majority of councils and elected representatives from both the Fraser Fort George area that is within the traditional territory of the Simp and in the North Thompson as well were in attendance. I think there was probably 19 political members there, plus most of actually Simp Council as well, and the one member attended online, and Ron Lampro Jr. attended online. So great discussions. Definitely left you sort of a warm and fuzzy feeling, and actually some great presentation, one on regional tourism as well. And then coming up on our thing here is short-term rentals on the agenda. I've spent a lot of time talking to a lot of people about short-term rental issues here over the last 2.5 weeks since this sort of landed in my ear, including TOTA, the government of British Columbia, and a couple different ministries. And yeah, it is a very complex thing, and we'll surely get into it a little bit with the staff report coming up. And I'll leave it there. Councillor Bratton, you are up next.
Yeah, so I was able to attend the C2C meeting in Valemount as well, and it offered a meaningful reminder of the power of shared experiences. The Walking Together theme resonated deeply, particularly during a collaborative exercise with representatives from the neighboring communities and Simp. I had the opportunity to work within the mixed group to generate ideas around continuing the concept of walking together. What became immediately clear was how naturally we gravitated toward shared themes of connection and communication. It underscored an important truth. In an age where much of our interaction is filtered through digital platforms, authentic face-to-face communication remains a skill that requires intention and practice. Even with constant connectivity, we are still learning how to effectively engage, listen, and collaborate in real human spaces. It was a powerful reminder of the value of intentional connection. The Walking Together theme felt especially fitting as it reflected the spirit of collaboration between neighboring communities with Simp First Nation. And I also have not been able to go to the Food Hub meetings lately, but I asked Joanna to give me the meeting minutes from the last one. And something I did not know, they lost their gaming grant, which is about $30,000 that they need to backfill. So they're actively working on other grants, and hopefully, they'll be able to backfill that. That covers the soup kettle, neighborhood kitchen, community gardening, and gleaning. So kudos to them for trying to find out some more grants. So they're very busy. They have a lot of things on the go, and I would just like to highlight a few of those. They promoted early food literacy with the Clearwater Kids Garden Contest and family meal prep packs in Clearwater and Barrier. Provided 5 food skill workshops, fruit tree pruning, seed saving, food gardening for beginners, water bath canning, pressure canning, 70 participants in total of those programs. They, of course, operated weekly farmers markets throughout the year, supporting 75 vendors, provided 40 sessions of neighborhood kitchen for participants to learn new cooking skills, and served approximately 5,191 bowls of hot soup through the soup kettle program and an additional 500 frozen soups. multiple programs here. This will take me a while to go out, but definitely a well-valued program to keep around in our community. Pitch-in is hopefully coming up. April 25th is what I've kind of come up with, if that works for anybody else that wants to help out. I was going to do this weekend, but that doesn't work for me now. So April 25th is a Saturday, 9 a.m., and I'll get more planning done around that. Tourism Wells Gray, I'm on that board as well. The information center, which they operate currently, it opens May 1st. And the space that is in the basement is actually going to turn into a flex space. So people can rent that if they would like $50 a day, if it aligns with their BC Parks and Tourism Wells Gray mandates. And I think that's it. That was a lot today.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you. I am aware that the bull sale that went on, silent auction, raised soup bowl.
I was going to say
Yeah.
that.
Do you,
Yes.
do you know what the total was?
I don't have the total of that.
I think it's somewhere between $1,100 and $1,200, and one bowl went for, I believe, $160 for one. Got
Yeah.
into a bidding war between a couple of people.
So the premise to that was donated clay bowls that people had made, and you could silent auction, and it goes directly to the food hub. So great idea, and it was down in the DOC hallway here, or YCS hallway.
Thank you. Councillor Frizzle, a busy day for you already.
Busy day, and on that premise, just coming right off of the seniors luncheon, which was very busy today, I got a call from Health Research BC asking if I would connect with the seniors and ask them to do a survey on challenges facing rural residents for medical care, like distance, limited resources and whatnot. So I handed this out to 60 people today, so hopefully they will do the survey, and hopefully it'll bring results. I also have more. If anybody has issues with the health, whatever your concern is with the health, or not concerned, I mean, there are lots of things too. It's just they're really looking for information so that they can do a really good research project. So, and if you're interested, I do have it here. Oh, I'm Councillor Matherin already had one, but you don't, Councillor McKenzie. Yeah, I know you do. Also, it was really interesting. One of our members had a conversation with a friend that he has that lives in downtown Vancouver, literally downtown Vancouver. He is in the concrete city. And they talked about, after a while, what's going on up here with the seniors. And he was absolutely fascinated with how many things that we do, all the activities that we do, how connected we are. And he was talking to him at 9 o'clock at night. When he woke up the next morning, the guy said, check your email. And he had a song that he had written, spent all night on Wells Gray Country Senior Society. And it is amazing. And I will have it available. It's going to be played at the Seniors Forum, which is on June 16th. And everybody's welcome to that, to come and hear this wonderful song and hear all about what the Seniors Advocate has to say and what a lot of other organizations that are coming will have to say. So that's all me today, seniors.
That is very cool. I don't know if I dread that or I'm excited about hearing that song, but is it really good? Okay. Awesome. Yeah. Good. Cool. Councillor Herring, you're up next.
No update from me, thanks.
Councillor McKenzie.
Thank you, Mayor Blackwell. Not much to report, but I did go last week, April 8th to 10th. I did attend the annual Kofi Convention in Vancouver. This year, the theme of the convention was Forestry as a Solution. The event had nearly 800 delegates, including industry executives, First Nations leaders, local elected officials, and provincial government officials. 3 days down there basically were centered on reversing the current industry crisis by focusing on 4 primary pillars, one being improving timber supply access, 2, enhancing the global competitiveness, 3 was reforming BC timber sales, or the reforming of BC timber sales, and number 4 was deepening First Nations partnerships. Some of the key themes and strategic discussions as follows. The Forestry as a Solution campaign was a launch of a province-wide advocacy initiative. This positioned the forest sector not just as an economic driver, but as a critical tool for solving BC's most pressing challenges. Climate goals being one, highlighting the carbon sequestration benefits of sustainable forest products. The other one, wildfire resilience, by using proactive forest management to mitigate risks to communities. And one of the other ones, the third of many, housing affordability, leveraging locally sourced wood products to meet housing demand. Competitiveness and global benchmarking. One of the highlights was a recent release of a study done by O'Kelly Acumen, which benchmarks BC's performance against international jurisdictions such as Sweden, Finland, and the US South. In short, these findings emphasize the need for regulatory reform and cost certainty to ensure BC can compete amidst rising US tariffs and global trade uncertainty. Another one was Indigenous Partnerships. Regional Chief Terry Teegee of the BC Assembly of First Nations, alongside with many other Indigenous leaders, emphasized that the future of this industry depends on the full implementation of RIPA. Discussions focusing on moving beyond consultation towards co-management and equity sharing models that will provide the legal and economic certainty required for long-term investment. And one of the other ones, implications for local government, for our community and countless others across the province. The convention highlighted several actionable items, one being fiber access. There's a renewed push for speeding up access to economic support for local mills and utilize fiber beyond the old pile and burn mentality. Community stability. There's approximately 9,970 businesses across 335 BC municipalities supported by the forest sector, which contributes roughly $3.4 billion in annual government revenue for healthcare and infrastructure. And the last one being advocacy. Municipalities are encouraged to support the Forestry as a Solution initiative to ensure local voices are represented in provincial policy shifts. This convention consisted of many notable speakers and perspectives. As someone whose family has been supported by timber dollars for the better part of the last century, this is a subject we must all continue to be the squeaky wheel on. This is just a brief report, barely scratching the surface of everything that was covered over the 3 days while I was down there. So I will forward a link to Tree Frog News for those interested, as well as a link that each individual can fill out that gets forwarded directly to all the British Columbia MLAs. So I can pass out if needed, anyone wants. So thank you. That's it for me.
Awesome. I always enjoy your post-COVID reports. There's always something in there that makes you want to think. So, yes.
And one other thing about
good.
that, they've actually bumped up. Last year it was 12. Now they've bumped up mass timber high rises up to 18 stories. So that was kind of interesting. It's just where we've watched it come from 6 to 12. Now we're up to 18, and yeah, they're really making a big push for that down there.
The building thing with the sticks and the round, it kind of reminds me of that. Hopefully this is stronger. I see that in our Jenga. Let's not go there.
Tinker Toys, yeah, that's the one.
Yeah. On that related note, there's an initiative, the North Thompson Forest Coalition. I'm hoping to get them to come to council and present, because a lot of the stuff echoes in some of the things that you just said. Cool. Councillor Matheson, you're up next.
Not a lot to report. I went to the C2C with Councillor Bratton and Mayor Blackwell, and I found it very inspirational that we are working together and moving forward in one direction as communities in this valley with the First Nations. And coming from a grassroots perspective, I think we can take a lot of pride in having accomplished this sort of cooperation. It's a unique project that's happened in our province, if not across Canada or North America, and I think it's being looked at by a lot of people as where we need to go, especially in this day and age. So I found it really interesting. I got a lot of information out of it. We'll have conversations, I'm sure, in the future. There'll be some hard questions, some hard conversations, but at least we're headed in the right direction. And I feel really good about the possibilities that it's going to bring to our valley, all the way from McBride all the way down to Barrier and Kamloops. So thank you. And that's all I've got to report.
Thank you. And go ahead, Councillor Sim.
Thanks very much. First of all, a huge round of applause and appreciation for the fire department. The Easter egg hunt is always a loved event and look forward to. And as always, there's just so many happy families and kids, and it really is just one of those iconic Clearwater events. So thank you for all the time that was put into that. Currently in town right now are some new family physicians who are working as locums, and what's been really, really helpful is the summary of all the recreational opportunities available through the District of Clearwater and how to connect them. And then through the community recruitment table is just being able to pull upon people to say, would you take these people, introduce them, and make those connections. But it really all starts with the recreational opportunities of the district. So thank you to Ms. Culp for her work there. Coming up is the volunteer brunch this weekend, along with the Ski Hill Work Bee. Other things that occurred, agenda setting with Mayor Blackwell and the staff, and probably of interest was the visit by MP Caputo along with Mayor Blackwell. So thank you for leaving that item for me. I appreciate that.
Yeah, no, it's good to leave it for you because you did a lot of the talking. You had some good ideas to the point that you almost had MP Caputo glowing.
Well, don't know what to say about glowing, but we can move on. It was a good tag team event. In particular, there was a lot of discussion around what's the number one issue, and Mayor Blackwell really outlined some of the infrastructure needs, and we discussed that. Or MP Caputo, he's got a new strategy where he wants to basically present a petition to get the attention of government. It just needs 25 signatures so that he can present at Parliament. It sounded like an innovative way. That further led to, some of the more specifics about Clearwater's infrastructure needs, namely water and sewer. And Mayor Blackwell outlined, our recent rejection over the CHIP application. And when we got into the nuts and bolts of it, the limited amount that we asked for, which I believe was 1.2 million, is that correct?
Yeah, thank you. Yes, we were looking for 1.2 million of funding, and then we were putting in our own funding for the other half of that project.
So we described that, and then we described for the fact that 1.2 million in a community that could basically then generate 450 homes for families had far more bang for the buck than maybe what 1.2 million would garner down on the coast. So he was really interested about some of the proactive measures that the district had been taking, and with coordination with the mayor and hopefully staff, he's asked that be resubmitted for consideration. And it was just in the light of, there can be a bigger impact that's made, and not everybody wants to live in densified housing. We talked about some of the pressures that would mean for younger people maybe moving into it. Strata fees of $700 to $1,100 a month. Is that necessarily that missing middle and that affordable housing? Whereas what communities like Clearwater can offer is far more opportunity. He was really encouraged to hear about the diversification of some of our remote workers and just the caliber of some of those careers that are taking place here. So it was a good opportunity to give a different lens for our community, and he particularly liked the new term housing-friendly communities and moving away from rural. Rural seems to just kind of conjure things that just aren't true anymore. And that since COVID, that there's plenty of opportunity. He was impressed by our land base, and I'm hopeful that, seeing that grant application with a new eye might actually put Clearwater in a better position. But it was very proactive, and I really appreciated all the mayor's details and some of those more specific backgrounds.
That was the one that got him glowing, though. The idea, he was like, I love that terminology on that one. Yeah, thank you for that concise version of that. And his strategy here was to meet with every community that he could and ask for their one big idea. I wish we'd actually known that in advance, because we would have been a little bit more prepared. He unfortunately did not reach out to Director Zhao, where he did reach out to other EA directors on the route of his travels. So Director Zhao has reached out to him directly, but I also did encourage Director Zhao to do that as well. So it's unfortunate. If we'd had a bit more time and we had known what the specific topic was, then it came up very quickly. So
it was even hard to know where they wanted to meet.
Yeah,
it was very flyby.
I apologize to Director Zhao for not looping in on that. It just totally came out of the blue, and I just did not get there. So leave it at that. Anything else, Councillor Sim?
No, I think
I
that-
do have a question though.
Yeah.
So the Ski Hill work bee is Saturday,
Saturday at 9 a.m.
and what are their specific needs for
There
help?
is a lot of wood that was very kindly donated. Big shout out to our local contractors who coordinated some efforts through with Interforce, so that was nice.
So are we talking firewood or are we talking something else?
Firewood.
Okay.
Yep, firewood, the ongoing Clearwater pastime. If that doesn't appeal to you and you're looking for, something to strengthen your back, I might also offer rock picking, which will be very nice. There's also wonderful things like, well, really, we've got certainly some outdoor projects, and I think the Ski Hill is really interested in hopefully talking to our Fire Smart people, and it will be nice to say fare thee well to some of the cedar shrubs in front of the wood log building.
Look at that.
So that'll be a good before and after. And I think it's also kind of interesting, and I don't know how far the conversation's gone, but working with some local businesses about what would then be Fire Smart plants or shrubs. Like, what is another way to kind of fill in spaces, and using that as a demonstration of the before and after.
Anything they can do with a building that's made out of logs with little gaps in it is probably a good idea. So the shrubs coming out, that's good. But yeah, specific to that, if they have the need, I do have my dump truck insured. I'm not feeling healthy enough to jump on the chainsaw, but I do have a dump truck and I do have a wood splitter I could bring down. So
Well, even the coordination of pizza and the cold drinks would be helpful too.
Okay,
So
well, there
there's
you
always
go.
there, and it looks like it's going to be a good crowd. And again, some of the energy and the enthusiasm by that group has just been astounding, and just committed to keeping it a really important part of the Clearwater vibe, so to speak.
thank you. Okay, that takes care of council reports. Moving on to CAO report, there is an update on table. I'm sure you would like to speak to it, Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As part of that update, but kind of broader, I was also asked to bring a bit of a community update on what's happening with various recreation things and whatnot. So I just thought, and it's a full page, but I'll try to keep it moving quickly. So street sweeping. That is expected to start on April 20th and expected to go for, I believe, about a month or so. Parks and beach washrooms, they're open now. Beach water quality testing for those people who like to get out and do cold water swimming. Our program of testing will start on May 5th and run until September 5th. That includes weekly testing, where the results are posted on the provincial website. Tennis courts are now open, including the new pickleball nets. Yellow iris mitigation is planned for mid-June. There's a PO being issued for that. Kapustinsky Park, the infield upgrade is out to bid as we speak, with completion by the May Day tournament, or prior to the May Day tournament. And as well, the bleacher upgrade will be completed by that time, where we're putting new caps on the bleacher seats. Our IA team, the initial attack team, the core of 4 folks there are starting their wildfire training. Refreshing is starting this week, and that'll keep going for a couple of months just to keep them sharp on their skills. One unfortunate note to mention is the wayfinding grant, which council is aware of and which we applied for through REDUP, was unsuccessful due to a highly oversubscribed program. As well, one point I don't know if council's aware of yet is that we are just in the process of issuing purchase order for the comprehensive zoning bylaw update. And that will be contracting with True Consulting. It's not actually going to come back to council for approval because it's below that threshold, which requires that. But it's an important community initiative. And I have to say, with the zoning bylaw, it's a significant advantage to be able to put that the master zoning through with this council who's already gone through the OCP process. So that is why we're pushing it. The target date for the final public hearing and completion is September 8th. I know council's always interested in the engagement on that, so we are planning a full, although not overly long engagement process. We'll be using our own website, Facebook page, print letters, newspaper advertisements, and an event poster from a media perspective. And then the engagement activities planned are a dedicated web page with a launch on May 1st, district and staff and TNRD feedback starting the week of May 5th, an open house planned for near kind of the third week in July. And that to be an opportunity for residents and business owners to ask questions of the project team and to view proposed updates to the zoning bylaw. And then a public hearing, as mentioned, on September the 8th with the goal of trying to achieve adoption at that meeting. So, yeah, that's the zoning bylaw. And then finally, the strategic update report is attached in the agenda. And as in previous meetings, we are absolutely open to questions on it, but I'm not going to go through it line by line unless that's what council desires, then we would be happy to. So open to any questions that council may have on that.
Any questions on this? Noting that there's a lot of completeds on there and a lot of greens, which makes me very happy. There are a few deferred and that sort of thing, but go ahead, Councillor Herring.
The development applications review refresh that's yellow there, where are we with that project generally?
So that project was a multi-phase project. So one of the probably the single largest component of the project was a DCC update. And as you know, the DCC update has been, council voted against the DCC process or the DCC bylaw that was brought forward. There's no current plans to do any more with that DCC update. The other component of that was training for the approving officer. That has been completed. There was one component of a public engagement with developers around trying to improve process. That is probably not going to happen. And the rationale around that one is we were looking for consultants to try to go through a bit of a process on that. Unfortunately, consultants have been extremely tied up with OCPs, zoning amendments. The same type of consultants who deal with that also deal with this. And in addition, at the district level, there's a bit of a sense of consultation engagement overload a little bit after those same processes, OCP, and now moving into zoning. So that part was never activated on that program.
Further questions? No. Good. Councillor Sim?
Thanks very much, and thanks for the updates for what's happening around the community. Will the road sweeping also include trail sweeping?
Is that us or is that them? I thought it was us.
Sorry, I had to confer with my colleague who says, yes, we do that. So
This year?
the answer is yes. If you need more information on that, I'll have to get back to you. But
Yeah, no, I just think because, those trails being so close to the road, just wondered where it was, and it's hard to see if they are actually cement pathways or if they are just gravel at this point in time, showing a lot of ice on that. And then follow up with that, once the roads has been swept, is there plans to do the refresh of some of the line painting in the community?
yes, I believe line painting is on as one of our projects. It happens. We try to do that let me back up a bit. Line painting is a fairly small contract, the district line painting. So we have to try to work with the line painting companies. So I don't know if that date has been set at this point in time of when they are available. So, but I believe that's in the plans for this year is another round of line painting.
Did we discuss last year that the line painting, we were going to have some equipment to do it ourselves, or is that just a figment of my imagination?
It's been discussed. I don't think we actually went down that road. Other communities, yeah, it's a hit and miss. Because of the 72 kilometers, it's a bit of a problem. Also, I get to talk to Barrier a little bit. They have a crack seal machine But they're running at 22 or 28 kilometers, so it's a little easier. There's lots of things that scaled out. It'd be interesting to go down and actually see what they do in action to see if it's transferable to here. But go further, Mr. Johnson, if you have a question.
Thank you. And as council will remember, we are looking at the feasibility study of doing more of the public works stuff in-house, and line painting is actually one of those. And very often municipalities will contract out the long line painting and then do the short line stuff. So around town, the lines at stop signs and crosswalks, pick those ones up where you can have your own stencils, but still put out the long line, because it is a pretty specialized equipment and you want people in and out. You don't want a slow process with that. So we'll get back as far as when the line painting is being planned for the year. Thank you.
No, that's always great. It always adds just a sort of a fresh look to the community after the spring. And then just moving on to the operations report, which is always great to see. I love this report. Just to remind, green means in started, yellow in progress.
So thank you. No, green means it's an ongoing project. It doesn't, like, for example, the first green one there, the yellow iris. We did our goals. Achieved our goals last year of the mitigation. We're going to do it again this year, but we can't really say completed, because that project of trying to deal with that, it's probably never going to reach a completed state. It'll always be a work in progress on that.
I guess the reason I'm wondering is because I'm hoping that the Raft River viewing platform is not going to be an ongoing project.
Well, thank you. And so the Raft River viewing platform, we actually have had some productive conversation with Simp First Nation on that, because obviously they have a lot of interest in that area and cultural interest as well with the salmon aspect to it. And as you know, council has agreed previously to allow them to do some work down below on the lands on the opposite side of the river there. So that is an area where we have some planning dollars in our budget for this year of what do we want to do. We're going to work with SIMP before we even do that to really get a sense of what this project could look like. And then based on those conversations, move forward.
Yeah, and I think what I'm getting at is as we color code what the projects are, because I think it's a great articulation to the community to show what's happening. It relates really well to our budget. It relates well to the strategic plan, is just helping sort of guide that. So whether ongoing, which the yellow iris is really important to a lot of people, it demonstrates an ongoing commitment to. So maybe that's a different category that people can expect to see that for a longer stretch with our budget process, whereas other ones that are just starting or in progress, like where do we see the completion to it, which leads to, do you see with this after Q4 is all tidied up and the year end is done, do you see just removing completed projects from this or finding a way to store them at the end of the report? What's your thought there?
I would suggest that it would probably be once we have a new council in place after the election, would be developing kind of almost a new project list with continuity from the old project, but then any new ideas and new strategic initiatives moving forward and specific projects, they would work their way onto the list, and the completed ones will come off the list. They wouldn't be thrown out. We'll still keep a record of, okay, here's what was completed in this term, and then we just keep moving forward with the same model. I like yourself, Councillor, I think the model is a quick and concise way to share quite a bit of information.
It really does. I mean, I've always been a big fan of that. No surprise to this table. And then I also really appreciated how the deferred referenced the budget, so that people could see it's not just that we didn't get to it, but there was a strategic decision for those budget decisions, yet it's still on the radar of staff and council there, which I thought was really appreciative. So it's just really sort of color coding a little bit more as this continues to evolve as an easy report card for the community to see everything that's happening in the district and the good work that is being done.
Thank you. Yeah, and we did have a really good conversation with SIMP initially, SIMP leadership, to discuss a broader vision, and they're very interested in slowing things down and having a bigger vision on Raft River area in general. Go ahead, Mr. Johnson.
One update, again, from my colleague is that we are meeting with Aardvark Line Painting next week. So once we've nailed down the schedule on the line painting, we'll update council.
Translation.
Line painting was likely in June. They're meeting to set it the schedule next week, sorry.
That's okay.
For the fact it's snowing on Raft tonight, I don't know if we're done with the sand yet. Just saying. So, are there any further questions on the report?
Yeah, the only other one is this: if there was room for another column, is just the date that projects were completed. And again, it really articulates to sort of the workflow and the project space. I don't know if that's important for other people, but I think it does. It really does lend to how much work is actually done. And how much pressure. So I just, again, it is only out of courtesy to staff because they are the ones that make this happen.
Thank you. Any further questions from anybody else? If not, we'll move on to the next two items. So we're into new business. First one are community grant applications. There are two recommendations and two reports on table. One is in relation to Rotary and the May Day Parade, and the second one is in relation to Wells Gray SAR and the Southern Interior Rope Exercise. Any comments from staff on these two? No? Yeah.
Good afternoon, Council. In front of you, you have two applications for the May Day Parade and the Search and Rescue. To date, the 2026 grant applications total $17,100. The community grant budget, however, is $32,597, so we have $15,000 left. We reviewed the Rotary Club May Day Parade application. It's for $500. The grant is to cover prizes, supplies for lunch. The application seems to meet all policy requirements. It was not foreseen earlier that the Rotary Club would be organizing the parade, so they put their application in today, or this last week, and the Rotary Club has approached other funders. The Wells Gray Search and Rescue is asking for $2,000. The grant will cover a portion of the rope rescue training for regional members. They charge about $100 per member. It doesn't really mention whether they approached other grantors or not. And I'm not sure why it was later than expected, but here we are.
Any questions or thoughts? If not, movers and seconders on this? Are you moving?
I'm moving. Yeah.
You move recommendation 1. Do I have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Sim. All those in favor? And that passes. On to the Wells Gray Search and Rescue recommendation 2. Mover and a seconder on that? Moved by Councillor Sim, seconded by Councillor McKenzie. All those in favor?
Oh, can we have a discussion?
Yeah, sure.
Just really to put an underscore on what the good work of search and rescue in this community does. Like even just over this past winter, there has been some extraordinary stories. And we are so lucky to have this volunteer crew who continually trains, upgrades. They spend a lot of time. Like this is not just one weekend a quarter. This is continual work. And so it is really just, I think on behalf of council, it's a pleasure to be able to have these funds.
Yeah. Councillor Matheson.
Yeah, I'll second Councillor Sim's comments. I did meet with Search and Rescue on the weekend, and I had a conversation with them about their rope training weekend, and there's going to be over 90 people coming into the community for the weekend for this specialized rope training. And it's one of the few venues in the province that actually is able to hold this sort of thing. And talking with them, the amount of effort that has gone into this is unbelievable. And they have used that rope rescue on an operation here last year that involved over a 300-foot rappel that took over 4 hours to do. So, like they say, the value we're getting out of this is amazing. So, and I will be doing forgot to mention before, I will be doing a little film project for them for recruiting centered around the rope rescue this weekend, as well as the fire department on some social media stuff for recruiting. So.
Excellent. And
Okay.
Mr. Johnson, correct me, that's good stuff. I believe that the TNRD and Kamloops SAR is intending to come to present to us on the new very, very large KSAR base that's being built in cooperation with the City of Kamloops and TNRD. Is that correct?
Yes, thank you. So they are planning to come shortly. I believe it's next meeting or the following to give us an update of what their plans are. As you mentioned, Mr. Mayor, a very large base that they're planning, and their hope is to have full region-wide participation in the cost of funding that base as far as the construction cost. So this is, of course, a different search and rescue society. This is the local Wells Gray Search and Rescue Society, which is, I guess, collegial relationship with Kamloops Search and Rescue, but certainly provides the local service.
Yeah, and only part of the reason I bring it up, one, it's a really exciting story if you haven't seen it. I can supply some of the reports to TNRD if you're interested. But I did note when KSAR did come to the TNRD for assistance with funding and stuff along those lines, there was a letter of support from Wells Gray SAR for this project. So my initial fear was, okay, this is, I mean, it's multi-million-dollar project. I believe between Kamloops Fire and KSAR, it's a $6+ million project. Are we stealing, you know, or are we taking resources that should be spread out more region-wide? But it was good to see that even our local search and rescue saw the value in this KSAR project. But I also think it should shine a spotlight on some of our smaller regional SARs that do good work, especially ours that we know goes above and beyond. Talking to the mayor of Barrier, their SAR operates out of a back bay in the fire hall that the district of Barrier needs back. So this is always a struggle for locations and that sort of thing, and what KSAR is doing hopefully becomes a model that the district of Clearwater looks at when we go to build our next fire hall and incorporate space in that space for SAR. Okay, so we do have the recommendation on the table, moved and seconded, I believed. All those in favor? And that passes. Thank you. Moving on to Fire Smart grant application, page 41 to 43. Fire Chief Smith, do you want to speak to this at all? Yep.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So we're seeking the resolution to apply for the next round of funding, which is right now the last round of funding. It's 1 year. UBCM, as you may or may not know, earlier this year they cut their funding back to a 1 year closed intake application for up to $200,000. The grant application is due by April 30th. There's an adjudication period of 120 days. Our current grant project goes till the end of June. That's been extended by UBCM to the end of August to allow the transition phase during their adjudication period. What else am I looking for? Sorry. So this would allow us to continue the program that's already been built up over the last 2 years. And yeah, that's what I got.
Any questions? Maybe questions are easier. So
Maybe questions are easier. Yes.
Maybe questions are easier.
I love questions.
Councilor Sim, go first.
So on page 42 of the report, it says, unlike the 2024 application, focuses heavily on establishing foundational program elements. The current intake is intended to support communities that are ready to continue implementing and maturing their Fire Smart program. What would be some examples of that?
Sorry, which paragraph was that?
Top paragraph?
Paragraph.
To simplify it is like what types of projects would the community look forward to seeing if we were successful with this grant? Because it's a great thing to be applying for.
Yeah, so we would continue with the position, so Mr. Breckenridge's position, host more events and allow for more mitigation work on our own lands, our own roadways as we are doing currently, and for vulnerable and senior populations. That's one of the programs we're doing right now. We can continue that as well. Fire Smart events, Fire Smart assessments. That's kind of that's the whole program anyway. So those would be the things we would continue with that we've already been doing as well.
So my understanding that we can continue to use money for existing programs and staff, but what has been cut out of this current grant?
What was cut out was the fuel mitigation work, like
Yeah,
the
so-
larger prescription-based
Contract required kind of planning
that, yeah,
required
that
work.
big, those big, larger projects, so we can continue on our own land. So our parks, green spaces, the side of the road, critical infrastructure. So the smaller type projects can be worked on.
But for, say a large chunk of crown land within the district is no longer, that's not eligible.
No longer fundable through
fundable
this,
to this. Okay.
through this
Yeah,
program,
that
yes.
was- I think that's a critical point.
It is a critical point to aligning everything else that's being done by us and even say the community forest on the outliers, right, so.
Yeah, and on that note, noting that the community forest has some really interesting creative ideas of their own on some of this stuff, and also are talking to SRG, Sim Forest Group, and also BC Timber Sales as well, I think is part of a conversation to deal with areas that are under what they call the WUI, wildland interface, urban interface, all these acronyms. So anyways, that should come out in the next little while, but it's really creative stuff. And if you get a chance to run into Casey in the hallway, pick his brain anytime you particularly want. So further questions on this one? Go ahead, Councillor Sim.
One more. I'm just wondering with that increased staff capacity, which would be really valuable, could there be assessments for work that could be done and then contracted out? So, for example, let's take the advantage of sort of Crown land. Could that position then do an overview and do recommendations, which would then be carried out by another party? So essentially making things grant ready.
Yes, actually, and to that point, so the larger crown lands, the ministry, the forest office out of Kamloops, they have a contract with a local forest company, well, not local, Kamloops, forest company to write prescriptions for areas around the community and as well as inside the community. That's a multi-year contract that they've been working on. So those are kind of already being built as we speak. So that would be, it's not really our job to work on the crown land within the municipality.
No, so
Right.
perhaps a poor example, but maybe
Yeah.
within areas, given the fact that we do have a larger land base, is that it could dovetail with some of these efforts, right? Like it would be a local lens for what else could be done.
Yes, oh, definitely, for sure. Like, so the Fire Smart Coordinator and the Wildfire Mitigation Specialist can do those assessments and provide those recommendations to the private property, give them a plan. They can go do that with the larger stuff. We can't work on the private land with the money other than the vulnerable.
No, but what I am trying to get at is that this is really important because once we get more information, more prescriptions, more overview, it actually lends to the fact that UBCM actually got a really valuable part of that
definitely.
funding
Yes,
stream.
definitely,
So that's
yeah.
what I'm trying to link together here.
Yes.
Is why this is important to continue, because although maybe we've got a pause in the funding, we're still going to build a case that this is important.
Yeah, very valuable for sure.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And further to that, there is still funding for certain fire smart activities on Crown land in and around communities through Forest Enhancement Society of BC. Correct. That's a whole other ball of wax that they get into, and they still do have a considerable amount of funds in their bank account.
Yeah.
Seeing nothing further on this, there is a recommendation. Somebody want to move it? Thank you, Councillor Herring. Moved by Councillor Herring, seconded by Councillor Frizzle, I think I heard over here, or Councillor Sim? No, Councillor Sim had her hand up. All those in favor? And that passes. And now to the great joyous report on STR regulatory framework. Has everybody had their lozenges and are you ready to speak?
Time to get croaky. My
Yeah.
apologies. Let me just get the PowerPoint up and running here. Trying to juggle too many things. Okay.
I believe the same PowerPoint is in the package in full.
That's correct.
A couple pages in, so those in the audience that want to follow along that way or can't see it on the screen, please feel free to do that. I'm gonna say, what's the page on that? 45? Okay, good.
89 is for the actual.
89.
Yeah.
Okay, 89.
Yes, and apologies for the very long-winded report, but it is quite a comprehensive change that really needs to be laid out in a pretty, extensive manner. There's quite a few amendments, 5 recommendations here that staff are looking to get passed. So you needed quite a large picture. We had to take a step back here and really kind of see how we got here. Clicker. There we go. So we are looking for today, first, second, third readings for the short-term rental regulations and enforcement amendment bylaw. There's a bit of an omnibus bylaw with a couple changes. We have a public notice bylaw, which is only technically tangentially related, but will improve the process if this is the direction council wants to end up going. And as well as adopting this sort of short-term rental temporary use permit policy. It's a policy of council, and that's what's going to be sort of used to weigh any applications that actually end up coming in. So it's intended to sort of create a workable local pathway now for short-term rental intakes, as well as sort of the review, notice, licensing, and enforcement without sort of prejudging any future zoning work. We're not asking today is to do anything about rewriting the zoning bylaw. As Mr. Johnson mentioned earlier, that we are looking to do the fulsome zoning bylaw. Whether or not STRs get looked at in this process is kind of still up in the air in terms of whether it's included or excluded. It is a very large change that needs quite a bit of public consultation for that overall in the master zoning bylaw where it goes. So I don't think we've landed there yet. Council's not being asked to adopt like a punitive compliance model. We're still looking at enforcement on a complaint-driven basis. That's been the standard council policy for bylaw enforcement that's remaining in this framework. Council's being asked to launch sort of a practical framework and revisit it once sort of we have local operating data. How did we get here? And I think that's the big question on a lot of operators' minds, and certainly council's mind as well, I'm sure. In October 26, 2023, the province passed the STR legislation and sort of expanded the local enforcement tools. There's a period there where legal non-conforming uses were protected, and those were removed May 1st of 2024 from STRs. So that was if it wasn't in compliance before. They had a bit of, operators had a bit of a grace period there. That grace period sort of extended into May 1st of 2025 in terms of when listings and were expected to display provincial registration and local business license numbers. That kind of took us into this year where some of those those listings that kind of renewed around this time last year was sort of the last push, and then they're just coming up for renewal now, and they're no longer able to kind of push their way through the process without a business license number. That kind of arrived at the crux of the issue. We had operators seeking business licenses for short-term rental accommodations. However, broadly speaking, the zoning bylaws and a business license bylaws for the District of Clearwater, it's currently illegal to have a short-term rental accommodation. Not allowed in the zoning bylaw, except for a very, very narrow prescription for bed and breakfasts. That definition is so narrow that if you had a basement suite, it wouldn't apply to that. That bed and breakfast has to be in your dwelling unit currently in our zoning bylaw. That means if you can't bump into them in the kitchen, it's not a bed and breakfast according to our zoning bylaw. So we did find that we weren't able to give these business licenses. We needed to create a legal pathway. We told the province that we have business licenses in effect. They are now holding those people trying to register, requiring that business license when they're registering for the provincial registry. If they're not able to register with the provincial STR registry, their listings will get pulled off of everywhere online. That's Airbnb, VerboBooking.com, everything. So right now, many operators are facing the prospect of losing their entire bookings for all of the summer if they don't get this taken care of. Sorry, did you have a question?
At what point in this process, like May 1st, 2025, the government came up and said the registration and local business numbers were required? At what point were we aware of this?
There was a running, I believe, local assumption, and it kind of gets down into that important local context, was that there may have been some mixed messaging in terms of exemptions for centers that were under 10,000 in population. And I believe staff were working on bit of an assumption that we're exempt from STR regulations because we're under 10,000 population. However, that was actually only the principal residence requirement. So for larger centers, Kamloops, bigger cities over 10,000 population, it must be their principal residence. There's no way around that. And as well as some municipalities surrounding larger centers. The District of Clearwater could opt in and require that if they chose to, but we were exempt from that requirement. We weren't exempt from where we have business licensing regulation in effect. That was still a requirement of SDRs within the district. So there was some miscommunication there for sure, and I think we became aware of that, well, approximately 2 weeks ago is when this sort of realization kicked in.
Could I just clarify, the miscommunication was on behalf of the government and to small communities?
Certainly there was effect there for sure.
Okay.
So we are where we are right now, and we are trying to create this local sort of pathway so people can, operators are able to get through. Next page there. So the current business licensing and zoning bylaws weren't built around STRs at all. These zoning regulations were passed around 2013. It wasn't a big issue here at the time. I think certainly when TMX came in, we can certainly say we felt the impact of STRs in the community. However, it was always been a complaint-driven model for bylaw enforcement. So if we did not receive complaints about short-term rentals, then they weren't acted upon. The district already has a temporary use permit pathway, and a temporary use permit is a pathway to allow a non-conforming land use. So something that's not allowed in the zoning bylaw. It's a way to get sort of a temporary reprieve from what's restricting it there. It makes it possible now to sort of, without waiting for a broader zoning rewrite, get a pathway forward for a residential property that wants to operate an STR. The generic TUP process is slower. It goes up to our planners at TNRD. Their timeline is about 6 months to get this through. It's about a $1,500 application fee, which is even an outdated fee, to be honest. So we were looking for a more flexible TUP process for these SDRs so we could get it moving faster. So yeah, the willing operators really need a practical route to get into compliance because right now there is none. So what this proposed package is doing, we have an omnibus amending bylaw, which is amending 3 different bylaws. It creates a dedicated short-term rental pathway across the development procedures bylaw, business licensing bylaw, and sort of ticketing it should be in there. Allows the delegated temporary use permit decisions for routine files. Our look is not to come back to council with 40 separate temporary use permit applications. It's to try and delegate to staff the ones that are routine, make sense, easy, non-controversial in a sense, and where those don't line up, either bring them to council or refuse them if they're outright just they wouldn't comply in that staff member sense. They always have the ability to appeal to council in any regards. If they are refused, they can always appeal to council. But hopefully should speed up the process and streamline it. The public notice bylaw modernizes the statutory notice by sort of using the district website and Facebook page as our sort of two of our official notice pages. A lot of municipalities have been adopting this because they're losing their newspapers, and so they're no longer able to actually post official notices in their newspapers. Obviously, we're still fortunate to have the Clearwater Times here. However, if you have, quite a large volume of applications coming in, they're quite expensive. They're about $1,200, for example, for the last ones we did for the last public hearing. So to try and get those costs down and utilize, the Facebook page and website. As we discussed at the last public hearing, it's likely garnering more interest from, community residents anyway if we have it posted on those places. So this is catching up a bit with some of that legislation and allowing us more flexibility for those statutory notices. The council policy is to set consistent evaluation criteria for the delegated decisions, and it clarifies what staff can approve, what goes to council, and what's simply not eligible. The whole package as a whole is trying to create that workable framework, and it definitely doesn't prejudge our sort of future zoning work, what we're going to look at in that master zoning review. So some of the guardrails, it's, we tried to look at the best practice across municipalities across the province. Obviously, we're very late to the game in this scenario, and many have already sort of arrived at what's the best, best practice in the province right now with our current legislation. So 2 SDR dwelling units maximum per parcel, lawful dwelling units only. So this doesn't address if somebody wants tents or yurts or tries to rent out an RV on their property. This doesn't cover that. That's not allowed under this framework. Certainly the STR registration doesn't cover that either. It's for lawful dwelling units only. If you're thinking of maybe a hotel down the road that has those glamping domes now, that's allowed under C1 commercial zoning under the campground use. Land zoned R3, multiple family residential is not eligible. So the affordable apartment buildings, you can't be running an STR out of those, for example. There is occupancy caps. Those are kind of brought in on most of these STR bylaws. So 2 guests per approved sleeping room, 3 rooms per unit. Wastewater capacity needs confirmation where required. So obviously some septic fields aren't necessarily ready to accommodate, an extra 2 or 3 cabins on a property or however that looks. So there needs to be some sort of letter of confirmation from a wastewater registered practitioner, RWO, if that's required. If it went through, so when we look back at the lawful dwelling unit, that means that it had an occupancy permit from a building inspector at some point in time. If it was built in 1970 and had, and passed a building inspection at that time, that's fine. We're not looking for it to meet the current BC building code. We're just looking for it that it received occupancy at some stage. However, if you, threw up a shack in COVID in your backyard and it never had building permits, that may not pass. It would require inspections from the building inspector to determine if it could meet those standards. So there would be some having to work backwards if that was what an operator wanted to do. Making sure that there's a local contact. This is a big one. So, let's say this isn't an SDR operator's principal residence, ensuring that they could live in Vancouver. They may not be local. Ensuring that there's a local contact within, a certain distance from Clearwater that's able to answer noise complaints, answer parking complaints. If they're partying at 2 a.m. and it's disturbing the neighborhood, make sure that there's a local contact to get in there and rectify those situations. And kind of just meeting all those other fire safety is a huge one, ensuring that it's a safe place to live in like any other, tourism accommodation in the district. So we do have, we're really aiming for a 6-week flow, which is obviously 4 times less than the current TUP process, which is 6 months. But this is really a best case scenario. We're looking to, get that intake and review it for completeness, kind of do a bit of a technical review on week 2. If it looks like it's likely to sort of pass through the process, obviously not prejudicing it, but if it's likely, if it's not, a trailer in the backyard or, something of that nature, then we'd issue a provisional business license. We're hoping that this provisional business license is the key to kind of getting them listed on the BC short-term registry fastest. So they'll get this 6-month provisional business license. They'll be able to input that number onto the system, get operating again right away. Then we kind of follow up on sort of the remaining process for the TUP. Public notice and direct notice, the submission window and follow-up. So it has to get mailed out to all residential addresses within 100 meters of the short-term rental accommodation. Wait for any follow-up if there is any feedback, and then we either make a delegated decision by week 5 or refer to council if it's become apparent that it's controversial or something of that nature, and then issue the license, which includes putting a notice on title, section 57 on title, basically to say that this is a permitted temporary use permit. They're likely to take longer if it's an incomplete or inaccurate application, if there's questions about lawful suites, status, life safety. We're gonna have to do an inspection to sort of look at those either through the building inspector, one or the other. If there's question about wastewater, water drainage, or other concerns. and then if there's just a significant public response. So 6 weeks is our goal. Having reviewed the listings that are currently on Airbnb right now, I anticipate few are going to meet that 6 week requirement or deadline.
Few are going to.
Few, very few.
Okay. So let's talk about a few things. For starters, can you go back one slide? So looking at this, there's things in here that I know anecdotally exist in this town already. For somebody to move forward with something that is non-compliant, does not fit into the current category, is there an avenue for, say, a zoning amendment or some other appeal to council in order to move forward with that? And I know there's going to be some tricky ones like ALR and things like that. But other than, I'm looking at sort of the non-compliant, I'm looking at the number 2 one there. Could they apply to rezone for a campground? Like, what's the options there?
For sure. So if property's currently zoned R1 residential or country residential, any of these number of these different things, and it didn't fit into this sort of TUP process, they absolutely could still apply for a site-specific zoning amendment and go through that process with the help of our TNRD planners, and then specifically follow through on sort of what they were looking to do on that property. And that could be adding campground use to a country residential property. If you have a big 40-acre parcel and you want to do campground, maybe that's an avenue they would like to look at.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I had another one, but I can't think of it right now. But go ahead, Councillor Herring.
So for me, I have a couple concerns with the proposed guardrails in particular, and then just like philosophically an objection to some of this. The proposed guardrail that really sticks out to me, that septic evaluation. You can have 15 kids, and each one of those is going to crap in your house for 18 years, and you're never going to have to go and get your septic system assessed, right? But you can have a guest for 4 months who's not going to have a similar impact to that extra resident in your house if you're not changing the number of bathrooms. I don't see why we should be asking these businesses to have their septic system assessed. I looked up online what that typically costs for real estate purposes, between $650 and $950. When I looked at the cost of all of this, including the 1.5 weeks of a 4-month rental season generally, they take out, I tried to use a local example that I knew of. They make about $7,500 off of their suite in 4 months. For that particular instance, to come into compliance with this, they would lose 6 weeks of their service, costing them $2,812. They would then have to pay $1,500 because they'd likely have to come to council in order, so it wouldn't be the $750, it would be the $750 plus the $750 for coming to council. They would pay $950 for a septic system assessment, $150 for a business license, bringing them to a total for this year of $5,412 of their $7,500. So that's 72% of their profit margin is now gone in 1 year. It will be, of course, lower in future years when it's just renewals and business permits. But that first year, they're taking a big loss. So I think you're going to discourage people from registering. The other thing is yurts, tents, RVs, boats. Those are innovative housing solutions in a community that has a desperate need for both rental accommodations for tourists and for individuals to make some extra money. We have a lower than average regional income. This is a mortgage helper for people who are paying for mortgages they can't afford. So those ones to me stand out as like just sub-policies maybe we could adjust if we do want to pass this overall. But the whole reason STRs came into play is because regulation choked out the ability for people to make money off this kind of thing. And this is the provincial government going on a path that's essentially reintroducing regulation to once again choke out any innovation and prevent people from making any money off of this. I'm deeply opposed to it. So for me, option 4, I see as an ideal solution here, just business licensing only. And if council's not amenable to that, I see option 2, proceed but modify elements, remove the septic evaluation, remove the lawful dwelling units clause where possible. Because when it comes down to it, I do see there's risk here at some level, but this is once again, what's a case of real risk? How many complaints have we had about this? How many substandard dwellings have we had complaints come back to the district about? Or is this all, we're basing it off provincial best practices for something that doesn't really happen?
Mr. Johnson, you want to take some of this on?
Thank you. There's a lot to unpack in that statement. So I may not hit every one of those items, but I'm sure my colleague may have more thoughts on that as well. So with regards to the getting the septic reviewed by a qualified professional, I think there will be a reasonableness factor there. So your point is, if there's a large house that is the homeowner now is empty because the kids have left and suddenly there's people coming in, that, and it's in a neighborhood where there's never been reported septic issues, I think the requirement there might be less than if it's in an area where there's a dwelling and suddenly they've added incremental dwellings into that area. So suddenly there is a greater demand on that septic system. And in which case, I think it behooves us as not only as the operators of the system, but the ones trying to manage the neighborhood impact, so you don't start getting, septic smells in the neighborhood or whatever, that we would look at the ones where we think there's a better chance of there being issues. Of course, there's not an issue if houses are on the district sewer system. The district sewer system where it's installed should be adequate to handle this. But for those septic units, I've had one person who's currently a staff member said that in a rental unit that they used to live in, they were told they could only wash clothes on X day in the evening because there wasn't the system, their septic system couldn't absorb that amount of water. So it does exist in the community, and I don't think it's unreasonable. With regards to acceptance of all types of housing, when I was looking on one of the websites, I happened to see an old Volkswagen bus being touted as a residential unit. Come and enjoy this fabulous bus in Clearwater. That's not acceptable. And while it might be funky, and while it might be appealing to some people, and it may be perfectly reasonable at certain times, from the district side, if we're involved in approving these and licensing these, we're saying these are acceptable for human accommodation. At that point in time, I think it turns into a liability issue if there's a fire or if there's something else happens, and the municipality, if they're pointing fingers and saying, well, why did you allow this? This is substandard. Does that mean the list can't be expanded? No, there might be some others. There's been some discussion around park models. Park models, they're very much like a mobile home, right? They have all the same amenities. So maybe there's some wiggle room there that we need to look at. But just to throw it open and say, well, we'll allow all housing types because it's a mortgage helper, I think that's problematic. And I think definitely from a liability perspective. As far as the total expenditures, and you did refer to it, Councillor Herring, some of those expenditures are upfront expenditures, such as the TUP, which is that's valid for a 3-year process, and then a reduced amount if it was to get reactivated for the next 3 years. So I think there is some upfront costs. There's no question. And is there more regulation? Absolutely. I can't speak to the provincial motivation around that, whether their goal is to introduce regulation, but we have to deal with it as it's come down on us, right? And how we see fit, and considering our own liability perspective.
Councillor Matheson.
Sorry,
go
Mayor,
ahead, Mr. Prime.
I do have some more slides. Can I?
Sure. How about that? But you got a couple more, and I think you got two more.
Only a couple more slides, but
okay. Take notes, people.
So, we did go over sort of what the, operational and financial considerations. Obviously, there is financial considerations up front on this. So we cut the TUP fees in half. We don't know exactly what the full cost recovery is going to look like on these applications, how much time is necessarily going to be considered. I think it's going to be a bit of wait and see and sort of determine that and maybe adjust it down the road if it's either more or less. So we're trying to keep it sort of the front end barrier lower for the routine files. That is the sort of what the aim of what this framework was really looking to do. So staff are going to monitor sort of the application volume, processing times, any of the complaint patterns, referrals, the burden on them, and sort of actual staff costs. So, it's designed to sort of start working now and then kind of be tested against real local evidence down the road. As Councillor Herring sort of did mention in terms of options here, staff are certainly recommending option 1 to proceed with the package. There are, we can modify certain elements. We could defer it. I strongly don't recommend option 3 or 4. The province will crack down on this if we don't. If we're just trying to rely on business licensing and they're aware that it's not meeting the zoning bylaw requirements, they'll still pull the ads. So it won't actually solve any of the problems. It's not forcing anyone to go underground because they've already been operating underground. They're already managing illegal operations. People need to sort of have understood that before they open to business. That's inherently their responsibility as business operators. Same as we tell, review the zoning before you purchase a piece of property, whether or not you're even able to do that. Contact the district if you're unsure. It's very critical. So the onus is certainly on the operator in that scenario. So even, if we issue just a business license in that scenario, the province will pull the listings and it won't matter in that regards. They need to be fully compliant with all district bylaws. Yes.
I don't believe it's the province that's pulling those listings. I do believe it's the platforms pulling the listings.
That is incorrect. It is the province through the STR that's forcing the, there's a data portal. They can see every listing. There's about 160 within the District of Clearwater currently. Some are inactive. Let's say you have your suite listed in Airbnb, Booking.com, Vrbo. That's 3 separate listings of that 160. So there's not 160 places. Right. We're estimating about 40 to 50 in Clearwater.
But
however,
to your point, you have had ongoing conversations with the enforcement department on this, so
yes.
He is getting it from
the
horse's mouth.
Straight from the horse's mouth in terms of what they're enforcing. They'll review it. It gets flagged for them in terms of whether the business license matches with what we're saying it does, whether the registry number is accurate, whether the zoning matches, and then if they see that those don't line up, they'll send a letter to these places, Airbnb, etc., to have them taken down. So, I recommended path forwards, adopt the package, launch the program, to create that framework for, operators to be able to be legal, and then measure and report back. And certainly there's going to be feedback that comes in, and there's going to be feedback that comes in through our zoning process, even as we discussed, even if we're not necessarily looking into it.
Yeah. So a couple of points that if you could clarify, Mr. Johnson or Mr. Prime, the $750, there are costs that are not directly staff costs here. I believe one that you've told me is that there's a $200 or $250 for notice and title that's required to be filed.
Correct. We'd have to register that with land titles as well. So there's been about a $200 fee just for that, let alone the staff time to do process the application.
Yeah. So so there's that. So it's not just things in house that we can swallow. Oh God, now I lost my thought. Anybody else got a question? And I'll come back. Councillor Masson.
So with the temporary use permits, how much room does council have to vary things? Like you say, people that can become compliant quite quickly in that 6-week period, they can get their license and move on. For somebody that's not compliant, they're finding trouble getting compliant and they come to council, how much wiggle room do we have on allowing certain things to go for 6 months until they can get it done and still issue a temporary use permit? Or is that something that comes out of the province and they just don't budge on?
That's a great question, and the question as I see it. So if someone's applied to staff, and staff says, "Whoa, hold on, this doesn't really meet the quals." It's either getting a lot of neighborhood pushback, because these will all be advertised as mentioned up on our website. So a lot of neighborhood pushback saying, hey, hold on, we don't want this here. There's not enough parking, or there's just too much noise. We've had renters in there before, and there's too much. There's a lot of neighborhood pushback. we're returning that to council for the hard decision. And then like any other hard time things come to council, council has the discretion to judge based on the balance of the overall decision. So if there's something that is clearly, if in the opinion of staff, this is just not on, it breaches all these rules, we're probably not going to bring that to council. It's probably going to be a flat out denial. If they want to come to council, we would then say to council, our staff recommendation is no for these reasons. And then I think council, because it is the appeal process, still has the right to say, well, you know, if you fix these areas up, bring it back or whatever, right? We still respect the right of council to make that decision. It's going to be something we're going to have to work on moving forward around what are the type of things you want to see. And in fact, council could even say, could pass rules that they don't want to see anything if there's significant violations of these various nature, right? So council will still drive that boat of how that looks moving forward. I don't know if that fully answered your question.
Yes, it does. I guess the message that has to go out is this is not going to be a fast procedure no matter which way you go. Even if you're coming to council, not being able to be compliant and coming in and begging for forgiveness for 6 months, it's still a long process. And it's not going to be something that's finished overnight.
I think that's a really valid comment. It's not a quick process. The suggestion around the provisional business license, which was suggested for a application that looks like it's going to tick the boxes, we could issue that in week 2. So theoretically, someone could come and say, I need a temporary use permit because my zoning does not comply. So temporary use permit allows that use even within the zone that it's in. We look at it and say, this is reasonable. It's got adequate parking. It's from a safety perspective, it looks fine. Just doing that quick check, we could say, okay, great. Here's a provisional business license. And then they will have that. And then 6 months to work through the whole rest of the process, that whatever that is determined that's needed for that particular property. So we are trying to expedite it, but with any time it's zoning or dealing with an inspection process, it's not a really quick process.
So on that, just because you brought up inspections, licensed businesses in the District of Clearwater need to be able to pass fire inspection. Is that correct? So I'm looking at some of these things.
Oh, he vanished. Sorry.
They did. So I wish I should have asked this earlier when they were here.
Certain businesses require annual inspections. Some don't require them. Some are every 2 years. It depends on the type and like the hazard level of the occupation.
So in the process of us confirming these as businesses, fire inspection has to happen at some point.
That's correct.
And that's part of the hitch here.
Yeah.
Where it can't just be anything. Fire inspection, building code inspection, these things are somewhat related. So it's going to kick in a couple of things here is unfortunately for some people. Councillor Herring?
Just to follow up first on the septic approval, my understanding from my read of the staff report was that we were moving from the idea of going a septic assessment as appropriate was the original language or was proposed, but this one would require it, not as appropriate. That was my reading. Am I missing that? One of the changes listed was that they would require this septic.
I still think, Councillor, without reading the specific language, and my colleague just says he didn't make that change specifically, it would be as appropriate. So again, if it's within the existing footprint of a place that has no known septic issues, and I think that would probably be deemed to be appropriate without prejudging those. It would probably be deemed to be appropriate. If it's new units that are in addition what was built there, we would require the same if someone was putting in a in-law suite or if someone was putting in cottage housing or whatever, right? We would still require that septic review. So it's no different. If you increase the expected occupancy load, that's a reasonable check to make.
For me, my understanding was that if you're increasing the number of toilets. You're increasing the actual load on the septic system. My understanding is that we don't judge the number of people using a system because that would require us looking at the number of people living in a house, family size, all of that stuff. We only look at the number of toilets feeding into a septic system. So if someone adds a toilet, as you say, like if they're adding a building that has, you know, a toilet in it, that makes sense to assess the system. But if we're not actually adding, so if an outbuilding has an existing toilet, to me it doesn't matter whether it's a rental tenant or just that's where they prefer to use the bathroom, right? Like it's, to me that doesn't actually increase load, and unless we're going to start assessing the volume of users of a system, you know, I don't see that as something we should be getting into. The other side of this is Airbnb's been around since 2008. Do we have a sense of how many complaints about the quality of accommodations posted on Airbnb in Clearwater have we received as a district?
To my knowledge, I don't think we get, that's not a report that we get, of people complaining about quality of accommodations that they booked. Have you ever seen a report like that?
No, I've never seen that report.
So then my question would be, you know, your comments earlier about the VW van as an accommodation, why is that a problem in the future if it hasn't been a problem in the past?
Because we're a regulatory agency, and it's everyone, you know, maybe that would be a really great place to go stay, and I'm not making any comments about the visitor experience, but as a regulatory agency that is responsible for allowing things to happen, to have to be legal from that from the perspective of an occupancy. They can't be a chicken coop what someone's cleaned out and put a bed in. Even if people want to feel close to nature and close to chickens, we can't allow that because we're a regulatory agency. In fact, in this area, we're the key regulatory agency. The regional district works for us in the building inspection process. The fire chief does the fire inspections. So if we don't do our job and if we're negligent in the area of inspections and what we allow, I believe that creates legal liability for us.
Also, earlier why I suggested and brought up the comment on campgrounds for things of a certain size. There is a accommodation place very close to us here that has geodesic domes, but it falls underneath their zoning occupation. So the opportunity to potentially change zoning to meet what you have is there depending on various things, but that's the route to get to that point, versus allowing, I think, everything. So,
but my point is, without a regulatory, without a history of any of this stuff happening, like we're regulating something newly that's never been a problem. We're taking somewhere where there's never been a problem and saying, you know what, we'd really like to regulate this area because we're perceiving a risk that has to date never existed, never come up. You know,
to our knowledge, and this is part of the problem of all of this. In discussion with TODA and with people within the government, I said, okay, well, Clearwater has not had business licensing for this, so therefore, why is there an issue? We haven't licensed this. That doesn't matter to the province of BC. So now we're in the position of being required to have licensing for this specific category, and to the point where regional districts have now been granted business licensing authority specifically to deal with this issue, at which point, once you grant a license, you are the regulatory body for this. And as annoying as effective as that is, that's what we're dealing with right now. And from what I've heard so far, this has been a big mystery to a lot of people. Even within government have kind of said, well, doesn't seem, it's confusing. So the best knowledge that we can go through with at this point, and this conversation goes on in the background. I continue to have conversations on and off with TODA and others to try to figure out why this is the way it is. But I've also had conversations with other municipalities that are 15 years or 10 years ahead of us on this. And a lot of what you're discussing right now, they've dealt with and gone through the process. I would hook you up with the mayor of Sun Peaks anytime if you want to have a conversation on it, so you can get. I mean, he's a very progressive guy, and he will walk you through all the holes that they've fallen through on this one. But it is, we are still at the end of the day, we are going to run up against the province of BC and what they want out of this. And like many other things, if we do not do what they want on this, they will tell us to redo it, I think is the feeling I got. So go ahead, Councillor Matheson.
I'll just reply with Councillor Herring there. You know, and I get where you're coming from, you know, about these, you know, different types of alternate accommodations, but I personally have been involved in 2 incidents where people died from short-term rentals. One was a fire and another was a van that was basically a short-term rental, I guess you could be considered, and it was carbon monoxide poisoning. So there are incidents out there. It's not reported to the district, but I think if you go to the coroner's office or the fire department, they'll give you a whole different idea on what that involves. I mean, all you have to do is look at fifth wheel fires that happen in these homeless camps and things like that. They're prone to fires, prone to all sorts of issues, health issues, mold, you know. So I get where you're coming from, but I think it's a false narrative saying there's never been a complaint, because issues are out there.
Sam.
So I have to say that it's all very amusing given the origin story of Airbnb, which started off with 3 air mattresses in a living room, and it was called Air, Bed, and Breakfast. So some of these things and how it's evolved into regulation and that, it does make me chuckle, and I wonder what the founders would say. In the spirit of Councillor Herring, what I find is that the septic system issue, well, I have to wonder if it's not going to regulate itself. So for people who are going on these platforms, and it is a very forward-facing, comment-driven environment, is that if they get a whiff of septic or that there's issues, that is going to be all over. They will be dead in the water just based on the client feedback on it. And I agree. I mean, you know, septic owners are responsible, and there are consequences to it. And I think the consequence would be the business. I just don't know if that's an area where we have to weigh in on it. So you're looking puzzled. So for example...
No, I was going to suggest potentially the septic, obviously on expansion of what exists at this particular moment in time, septic would make a lot of sense if somebody suddenly... Because this is the other thing. We're opening... Now that we're going to license this, we're opening it up as a possibility to everybody who was in the past potentially squeamish about operating something without licensing or illegally, as the term is put out there. We can debate that one. So if somebody says, cool, now we're in the business of having 4 cabins or 3 cabins or some sort of thing along the lines on a property that is reliant on septic. We'll take Greer, for example, which has clay generally a couple feet down, where that's not really going to work. That's where I can see the need for septic approval being done, especially on expansion. I don't necessarily think in most of Clearwater, if staff is using their discretion, the drainage is so bloody good on most of this thing that we would probably, unless there's evidence of past septic issues, be going down that road. I just don't see it too much. I don't think
it's really hard just even for owners, because it is their reputation, and they will be annihilated just on their own. So to
100% agree that this, if you have smelly property, you're going to get taken out.
You're going to be annihilated for it. So I do support, you know, that particular one. And I also know that it's really difficult to get that all done and dusted and going through it, and it becomes, you know, a logistical nightmare. And at the end of the day, a lot of this is just in reflection to, you know, some of the compression pricing. We've seen very large uptakes for costs in Clearwater. I mean, I am looking where my family is going to be staying in September, and some of the places that used to be motels are certainly at resort pricing. And that eliminates a lot of a very important industry for Clearwater. So it is not to say that I'm not in favor of regulation, but as we evolve, and to the mayor's point about expansion, I see that as a growth there. Otherwise, you know, we become something maybe, you know, that we're not. One of my other questions is, am I understanding that these new regulations would have an impact on 40 properties in Clearwater, or 160? I wasn't quite clear on that.
We don't know, do we?
Yeah,
a guess.
Councillor Stim through the mayor. We're not clear on the exact number of operators currently in the district. There's 160 listings, which we're assuming to be somewhere between 40 and 50 actual individual operators within the district. But I think there needs to be some clarity sought there through the registry once we get access to those systems and have that pathway forward.
And back to the clarity on that 160 listings. That's not 160 listings on one platform. That's duplicate listings in many cases on multiple platforms. So
That's correct, Mayor.
Yeah, that's one that's a little bit in the air on this
Okay,
one.
no, I just wanted to check that. I just also want to get some clarity around the 6-month provisional that you were suggesting. So if I understand that there is the pathway forward, that businesses can come forward, they can have a provisional, but they have to meet the checklist before they get the provisional. Am I understanding that?
Councillor Sim, through the mayor. Essentially, there would be a quick checklist to ensure that they're likely to meet that threshold. And then in that scenario, they would be issued the provisional business license. There's some where it would be very apparent very quickly that they wouldn't make it through the TUP process, so they wouldn't get that provisional license right away.
All right, so with that provisional license and noting that we're going into May, and if they hit that checklist, that would give them 6 months to carry through this summer, which would give them fall and winter to work on their TUP application.
That's correct, yes.
So,
And we would be working on the TUP process concurrently throughout that. It's not like we would just stop after the provisional license. We would continue working on that to issue it then, 6-8 weeks later, depending on
See,
how.
8 weeks later.
Yeah.
The TUP process continues. This just buys them
that's
this
right,
season.
and that's what I'm verifying, is that the 6 month is actually a way to help everybody come along without being punitive.
That's correct. Otherwise, the entire summer is done for most of these operators.
That's right. Okay, so I just want to stress that this is a positive about this.
Absolutely.
And to that particular point, that has in my discussions with TODA and with people from it's regulated under the housing ministry, has been we're hitting a wall on this. If there's some way that we can get a 6-month pass on this, so that we can get all of this done without penalizing these folks, that would be awesome. And that be any lost booking or anything along those lines, that has been rejected.
Yeah. And so, Mayor, one of the things through talking with the enforcement division of the provinces is they're working currently on setting up a bit of a, hopefully setting up a bit of a reprieve here, in that if an operator currently is not able to meet that licensing requirement, instead of basically deleting the entire account, pulling the listings, canceling every one of their bookings over the summer, they're going to suspend it for the next 6 months instead of that sort of eliminating. And at least the suspension, while they won't be able to list it online, they won't lose their current bookings. So we have that in place right now, we believe. It's still waiting on some confirmation from the province, but at least that's just a tiny...
Yeah, so if there's anything, and we know what the booking cycle is like, if they have current bookings, hopefully they don't lose what's on their books currently. And that's, this has been day to day, like almost hour to hour on some of this stuff.
My follow-up question is, could you confirm how long the TUP would be valid for? We've done in the past for 3 years. Is that still the same?
That's correct. 3 years within one possible 3-year extension, so up to 6 years.
And so so if we're looking at 6 years, and then what do you anticipate that pathway to be?
We certainly believe before the end of that process that we would address it, maybe not in this zoning bylaw rewrite, but potentially a year down the road, where we have a bit more time for more extensive engagement with the public on STRs in general. So, and then have an amendment to the zoning bylaw in that scenario. That's so 2 to 3 years. So before the end of the 3-year TUP process, we anticipate having that covered off in the zoning bylaw.
Yeah, so make it legal through zoning within 3 years.
Okay, and I'll just look for any other questions. I've got a couple more, but would like to look around the table. Go ahead.
Yeah, just in follow-up, it's page 49, the last sentence of the first paragraph, where it says, the parcel is not connected to community sewer. A current wastewater capacity confirmation is mandatory rather than discretionary. So that's where I had gotten that idea that it was not. Page 49. First paragraph.
And I guess the other link that I'm trying to, or maybe I'll let you look at that. Sorry, Mr. Prime.
So thank you for bringing that up, because that was not intentional. It's not that mandatory word is in there, but that wasn't the intent of we believe there is an appropriateness test that needs to be, a reasonable test that needs to be applied here. So thank you.
So because we did go through an interesting journey of life called TMX, and needing some extra accommodation, we all went along with it, recognizing that there was some positive impacts for COVID, and so now the story has written itself. I just want to clarify, if people were building, as was mentioned, a unit on their backyard, that would have been in contravention to their existing zoning. And if they hadn't have had a building permit, that would have been discovered, or they would have been made aware of it. Like, I'm just wondering, like, where has the district maybe lost our role, because we've had a lot of evolution, and where it is also on the property owner that they used circumstances to be able to develop opportunities.
Go ahead, Mr. Johnson. This is a loaded one.
That's a really loaded question. So anytime a property owner does things on their property in contravention of zoning bylaws, that's on them. Now, anytime someone builds a unit for housing people without a building permit and following those rules, that's on them. So what we'll see through this is a bit of a catch-up, right? This is the one event, this requiring of business licenses to be able to do short-term rentals, which is going to say to everybody doing it, hey, is what I'm doing legal from my zoning? Is what I'm doing legal from the safety perspective and all the other perspectives of this dwelling unit I'm trying to rent out? This is that, I hate to say it because it sounds too doom and gloom, but it's almost like the day of reckoning where people have to, okay, what are we doing here? And at that point, people can decide, you know what, I don't want to do this anymore. The cost is too high or whatever, or the paperwork and the regulation, I don't want to do this anymore. Or they can decide, no, let's do it. We've created a legal pathway for the first time in Clearwater where someone can do this legally. So that's what this proposes, a legal pathway. It's also the only way that in the long run, they'll be able to advertise that business venture. And that's not on us. That's on the province, their regulation. So I think there's some good news out of this. And the other little bit of good news, which may not be taken as such, is that we're trying to expedite it. It's going to be slow, as Councillor Matheson said, but we're trying to expedite the process where we can with the use of provisional business license. So I think there's potentially some wins here, even though I know this, for people caught behind this 8 ball, they're going to be viewing it as negative. So I don't know if that answered your question. But.
Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Prime.
Thank you. And further to Councillor Herring's points, and I apologize for missing that through the draft versions. If you look at the actual policy for the council's criteria here, on page 85 of your agenda package, the standard conditional criteria for delegated approval, at the very top of the page under 5, where appropriate, the district may require written confirmation of septic capacity, potable water adequacy, or other servicing information before issuing the permit. So there is discretionary built right into the actual policy that staff would have to follow.
Okay. So, and that's part of the reading of the bylaw.
Just to that though, I always worry about discretionary when it's not laid out. And I mean, my personal favor is the fact that a septic owner is going to run their own gambit. It's their own cost for pumping. It's their own embarrassment. Like, there's a lot of natural consequences.
Yeah, but and to Councillor Sims' point through the mayor, not only, but it's not just what affects them. It can affect the neighborhood. It can affect environmental concerns. Think about the Dutch Lake in terms of what's being kind of leaked into there potentially right now. We don't need to exacerbate those situations in those scenarios.
Yeah.
You bring up a very interesting point about what is already existing and now what we're trying to curtail without actually dealing with what is existing. So I do see some conundrums here.
Yeah, for sure. Further questions or comments?
I'm wondering where Tourism Wells Grey has been involved in these conversations, because this is obviously something that's important to them, and what's some of the feedback we might have gotten.
Yeah, directly. If you want to speak to, I asked Claire to come to my office last week and have a conversation with it. Obviously, there's some concern about this, but I think what's kind of caught us a little bit is, this has been, they're aware. I'll leave it with that. I think Mr. Prime has been talking to them. I believe Ms. Campbell's been talking with them for a bit, trying to find solutions to this. Bottom line on all of this is we're basically going to be like everybody else. And there are this feeling that STRs in regional districts that are not under the direct impact of municipalities, if you're in a busy area, the regional district outside of that will be regulated as well. All of that is what the province of BC is doing next. So, and we're already starting to see that. I did speak to somebody who today had to prove that they actually were a commercial property zoned as a motel / campground to retain their STR bookings, even though they were actually completely already in compliance. The province is looking under every rock and stone on this.
I see the appeal to Alberta.
Yeah.
Just
Anyways,
saying.
this is what we've been dealt, and this is what we can do about it now.
The final question that I have is, where in this process do you see some engagement with property owners and operators of STRs? So I go back to, the yurts and those types of things, which are very unique accommodations. And I was really fascinated to, kind of go on some travel forums, etc. And that it's almost like a point of pride to do there. I understand the legal obligations. Like, I understand what you're saying about, we have had fires in some of our RV areas, where it has caught on fire. And that is the role of the district to, make it, when you come to our community, it is a safe community. But I am looking about some of those yurts and some of the glamping things, which has become popular trends. And how do we hear that, and how do we help cultivate it, making Clearwater that unique accommodation opportunity with our backyard? It's been a long time since somebody said, is there a question in there? So is this that time?
Yeah, I'm just wondering that, but I didn't want to sound rude. So
No, I really like it when you say that. What is the plan to engage owners of properties of the STR nature and hearing the different variations to ensure that we continue to modernize and maybe adapt to new trends in travel?
Well, getting back on the theme, which is maybe not the most popular, the fact that we are a regulatory agency, I think the first step in that will be having discussions with building professionals from the TNRD about what structures would you guys, or what structures are safe for the intended use of human occupancy, and if some of those other alternate structures, if they say, oh no, that's an appropriate structure based on whatever their determination is, maybe we need to consider some of those structures. Because you're right, it's interesting to some communities have more of a variety, or sleep in a tree house or whatever. But I think we're going to err on the side of caution, and it's going to be on the side of what would be recommended by building professionals. So, and again, it's a regulatory answer, but.
Right, so you're looking to be proactive in answering questions around the safety for the traveling public.
Absolutely, but with a guideline that once we've developed, it's like, okay, we're not going to be allowing this or this or this, that we don't have any expectations.
And just my final comment, and Merlin, you would probably know best about this, is I believe that there was a really tragic incident at a campground where there was a tree fell and that there was a death involved, and that actually changed some of the legislation around tree safety. Am I remembering that correctly?
There's been issues with this going back 25 years.
Yeah, and so I see it in the same vein as being proactive, bringing people into compliance, and that, it has been a very, good time and opportunities, but now we have to head into the next chapter. But I do stand with the septic.
Mr. Prime?
Yes, thank you. And just to Councillor Sims, through the mayor, the communication, we're gonna do a very solid blitz on this for communication-wise once this is passed. I don't think I've mentioned this yet, but we are looking to maybe have a special council meeting. Obviously, the next council meeting is scheduled for May 5th. We're looking to get these passed faster so we can get operators legal faster. So hopefully a special council meeting this week sometime. Once these bylaws are passed or the framework's passed, we're going to go out there, have a specific landing page for STRs on the district website, large push on Facebook, and everywhere we can, basically, to get out there. You'll note there is an FAQ page or report here on page 54 forward. When the FAQ is 8 pages long, then you know it's a very complicated discussion. So there's lots to digest there. I'd recommend it. It really boils it down, and it's a great sort of digestible fashion there. We'll get out there with everything to try and ensure that operators are aware of what's coming down the path line and what those frameworks are.
Hey, Councillor Herring, you got something new?
Just to clarify, the tents and RVs, the safety of those structures are regulated by other bodies that aren't municipalities. People are allowed to stay in RVs all over the place. So I don't understand why, to use them in that context, it would suddenly be a municipal responsibility. You know, if an RV can burn anywhere, that would be the responsibility of that RV company to provide a safe product. The same as the car, the same as the yurt. They're intended for human habitation. That's what they're for.
In the municipal context, and you tell me if I'm wrong here, it would be the responsibility of the campground owner to ensure the fire safety on that. So it's different in zoning, and it goes back
Of the RV?
Yeah, so this has happened in this community where RVs have caught fire and burned in a campground. The campground operator allowed the RV owner to modify their RV in a way that was dangerous and caused it to catch fire. If you run a campground, if you are the person supplying the RV, if you are supplying the yurt, the geodesic dome, you are following a set of regulations based on your zoning for campground. And yeah, I mean, this is where it comes back in, and I think we're going to have those one-offs come to council and say, I've already got this here. It's already safe. I let them use the bathroom inside the house. This is where it gets to that more difficult process where it comes as an appeal to council. So I think there's a path through. I just don't think it's an automatic path through. Oh, Matheson.
Yeah, I think at this point, we just need to focus on our report right now. There is a sense of urgency here. I, for one, am sick to my stomach about what this is going to do to our tourism in our community.
Yeah.
The impact it's going to have on hotels and visitor accommodation. I've talked to a couple of operators already, and they're worried. They already cannot find enough accommodation. So the sooner we get this moving, the better. It's something that's been given to us, and we don't have a lot of control over the end result of all this. I think that there's lots of time for discussion about variations and changes, but the landscape is moving so fast and different right now that I don't think we have a choice but to move forward and bring this forward.
Yeah. Councillor Brad.
I have a question. What happens if we don't like all the parameters that are in the bylaw? So like, for instance, the park models, what's the process for us to go about to change it? Is this going to extend the life of this bylaw being passed? Or is it say next year we decide there's 70 people that would like to include the park models?
So this will, sorry, Councillor Bratton through the mayor, this will still tie back to the province's short-term registry system. They absolutely do not allow tents, yurts, camping. So in those regards, if they still see a park model listed on Airbnb, they will still pull that.
So it's still coming back to provincial regulation on it. So this is back to where it varies on a different thing that is not regulated. This is back to motels and campgrounds, which are not, they may list on this, but they're not under this STR regulation.
I see. So if you got, sorry, one more question.
Yep, go
If
ahead.
you were, changed your zoning and you were a campground, would you be allowed to, do they, I don't travel much, do they list on Airbnb and those types of things? Or would the province pull that?
I believe they are still allowed to be listing because they're commercially zoned. So they're not residentially
Okay.
zoned. So a
Okay.
campground can still list lots, and you don't see a campground list tents generally. They might list yurts, or they might list, spaces for you to bring your RV, but generally they're not providing the fixed accommodation, potentially cabins, but those are all under the one commercial zoning category.
Yeah.
Those are allowed to be listed on Airbnb or Booking.com in those scenarios because of the commercial zoning behind it.
Yeah, so we're still working in residential here, which is
Okay.
where the
That's where the
commercial is
kicker
held
is.
to a higher level, a higher fire inspection, all sorts of other things.
Okay.
So, and I appreciate your comment. We need to
Hopefully.
move forward with this, but I do also want to say that this is really the first robust conversation that council has had. So as we go out into the foyer, let's dig in, because we do owe it to our operators to, get specific and spend a little bit more time on it. Is there any flexibility around the maximum 2 guests per bedroom, 3 guest bedrooms per unit, and 6 guests per rental unit? Like, I understand how that all works, but I am looking at some of the family travel components that come through, which has often made a lot of these housing or accommodation options manageable for them.
10 per unit?
That's why I'm just clarifying.
Yeah.
So it's from what tell me if I've got this right, is that it's so maximum 2 guests per bedroom, maximum 3 guest bedrooms per unit, and then a maximum of 6 guests per rental. So if you're a family of 6 in a unit, you could be fine. But if you've chosen to have, the family and maybe the grandparents, then maybe you're not allowed. So I'm just trying to adapt to that because family travel has been quite popular to Clearwater. And so have I understood this correctly?
And once zoned, to follow up on this, does this fall under complaint driven?
That's excellent. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that would fall under the complaint process, similar to if you go stay anywhere and there's a certain occupancy, but you go there and you got your kid and your kid's sleeping on the floor and someone else is sleeping there. Unless there's a complaint, we won't even know about it, right? So we're
I
not saying
appreciate that
anything-
clarification.
not saying anything goes, but it's beyond the realm of, we're saying, here's the rules around size.
Okay.
What actually happens in that room, we're kind of out of that loop.
I think that comes back to that answer is pretty standard in most accommodation industries. Hotels obviously pay a lot more attention to how many people show up in the room, but if there's a problem, they kick you out because you've got too many people in the room. I think we're in the same ballpark here.
And we're all comfortable with if council review is needed, is it $750?
I don't think we have a choice on that at this point because of the fees that are required to register on title to start with. I do hear in staff's voice on this that if these go smoothly and they don't take much staff time, that can be adjusted down. I think that's already been stated, but that's where, until we know what 100% we're dealing, we already know we have the 200. We already know this is going to take probably 3, 4, 5 hours of staff time probably per file, depending on how complicated and how much follow-up is needed on each one of these, plus inspections, et cetera. I think we're going to be eating costs on this as it is at the 750. That's why moving to having this fixed under zoning is such a, is the end goal on this. Staff can comment and correct me if I've
Nope, I think Mayor Blackwell, you have everything correct right there.
So could we take a 10-minute recess just to digest all of this?
I think everybody needs a 10-minute recess because probably need a pee break, and it's 3 o'clock, so I'll see you back at 3:15.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, no, so thinking about this during the break, I mean, what this does, as we've been finding out in our investigations of this around the province, trying to find other examples of communities that are in the same boat as us, and it really has been hard to find them. And part of this is because Clearwater only developed business licensing 12 years ago, is my understanding. And in that time, we developed new business licensing, and what's the need to refresh business licensing on a brand new bylaw doesn't seem like something that would come up that often. And then we went through Trans Mountain, where everything just got so busy that looking at a review of business licensing wasn't necessarily on our agenda. So we got to the point that we're at right now. That said, all of the things that we're looking at to pass today, or to get moving today, are to take us to the same standard as other British Columbia communities. And as I said, I can't seem to find one that's in our particular boat. So this takes us up to where every other community that is offering STRs is at, plus or minus a few details, point is already operating at. So whether or not, there's going to be a lot of criticism, is this a fair playing field? This is bringing it up to the playing field that every other municipality has had to work with up to this point, and the operators here have not. And I feel for them, obviously feel for them, because this is getting up to speed with something. But all these other places had to get up to speed with this years ago, potentially a decade ago or more. It's just us, because of the unique situation that we were in with a few things, that it's taken longer than that. Realistically, we probably should have had this identified 2 years ago and started work on it. But here we are now with what we have, and we work through with what we have. Further questions or comments?
Just sort of on that, though, I do want to say that, maybe it could have been 2 years ago, but the government wasn't asking that 2 years ago.
Absolutely, we're not. I mean, to conversations that I was having as little as 2 weeks ago, even with tourism professionals, they were still going, but you're under 10,000 population. Why is this a problem?
Yeah, and so I do...
And sorry, specifically on that as well, but you don't have business licensing for this category. Why is this the government of BC even bringing this up? So those 2 points specifically, especially the second one, because that was the one I thought we had an out on. We do not have a license category for STRs. If we don't have a license category, then how can we license? And the province has stated through enforcement that if you have business licensing in anything, you must have a license for this, and that's a little bit where we're stuck.
Yeah, and I wanted to make sure that was a point of clarification, because the work that staff has done has been really, really great under such pressure, and I think that we all value and appreciate the countless hours that have likely gone on since this done. So thank you very, very much. This was not easy work. I think what you did is you created this report, and it must have been at least a month's work all crammed in. So thank you. I do want to just also clarify the fact that, it's been a bubbling issue. I think that Tourism Wells Graves probably had this, but as the entity that's actively engaged in this, is that it's only now just really popped as well, showing that the government has decided to put the hammer down. So I think we're responding as quickly as possible. Is that a fair assessment?
I think that there's been knowledge within the industry, and probably even at some level in government. It's just that there's been mixed messaging from the province of BC as to the urgency and the certainty as to how these rules apply. And talking to the enforcement branch, because this has happened, the enforcement branch has said this is the absolute certainty that you need to operate under. All these other things that were sort of, the $10,000 or the 10,000 population thing, no, that only applied to certain things. This is the certainty that says you must do that, and it still comes down to there's still areas that are outside of this whole policy that exist in this province, but they are coming into compliance as well, because the province wants it that way.
Yeah, and I also want to appreciate the fact that, as you have said, that this is not, rocket science when we're not reinventing, anything. Even just preparing for this meeting, just looking at, communities under 2,000, like Radium Hot Springs, some of the communities in the Comox Valley, like they're all under our size, and they are only just adopting, and everything that's being suggested in this report is is mirroring what, you know, they're also implementing. So it is not anything dramatic. And again, this is required by provincial legislation that operators need to have the business license to present to the government. This is not us. It is how we are supporting operators. Do I have that correct?
You do.
That is correct.
Yeah,
Okay.
In my understanding of that too, and it's interesting that you found a few that are in the adoption phase as well, because that was, I put that out there and I wasn't finding them. So yay, good. Okay, where are we at then, folks? We do have a list of recommendations. I'm hoping that we will move them forward today, because if not, we will delay the whole process. And I did hear Mr. Prime suggest potentially an extra meeting if possible in the short term to move this along faster. I'm completely amenable to that. I'm sure many of you would be as well if we had a special meeting that got us through getting these things to adoption in a more timely fashion. I think we could do that. It's been a while since we've had a need for a special meeting, but yeah. Are there anything that anybody would like to deal with right now, or would you like to bring forward potentially at a future meeting?
No, I think to Councillor Matheson's point, I think it's important that we move forward on this. I do just want to make sure that I have it understood what we are being asked, because this was a very beefy report and lots of it. To get this is that why this is needed. So the provincial rules for short-term rentals changed. So now hosts must register with the province. Hosts must have a local business license. Legal grandfathering for old short-term rentals is gone. Enforcement tools are stronger by the province using these platforms.
That is all correct, Councillor Zell.
Okay, so Clearwater must have its own clear local rules so that operators know what's allowed, staff can process applications efficiently, and the district can enforce rules fairly.
Also correct.
Okay, and so the key points of this new system is short-term rentals will be approved using temporary use permits, which will come after the 6-month grace period. That's my point of clarification.
Our timeline is we're hoping 6 weeks. It would be somewhere during that 6-month process.
Okay, so what I'm saying is, so six weeks, but it's a 6-month licensing that will then get into the temporary use permit.
That's correct.
So
Okay.
provisional licensing is possible potentially after 2 weeks, which would allow them to re-register and start to operate again.
Okay, so short-term rentals will be approved, not immediate zoning changes, right?
That's correct. We're not recommending any zoning changes at this time.
Applications, it's being suggested that can be approved by staff under delegated authority,
That's correct.
with the really complex and harder ones coming to council.
And that is correct, because if that is the case, we don't have to bring them back to a council meeting for decision on the simple ones.
And applicants are always offered the opportunity for an appeal to council if they don't like staff's decision. That's part of the delegated power to staff.
This is also similar in line to boards of variance and things like that.
Yeah.
Where there's an
Okay.
oddity on a building.
The final summary is where short-term rentals are allowed and not allowed. They must be in lawful dwelling units. Are limited to a maximum of 2 units per property.
That's correct.
What is not allowed are tents, RVs, trailers, boats, yurts, glamping units, etc. Illegal or non-approved suites, and accessory buildings not approved as dwellings, as well as R3 zoned multifamily housing.
Correct.
Okay.
There is an appeal process for some of this. Would somebody like to move a recommendation here? We've been at this for a while. Councillor Herring.
I'd like to move option 2, that we proceed but modify elements of the package to remove the requirement for proving septic system capacity and remove the restriction on type of dwelling.
Ooh, type of.
On the yurts, RVs, all that.
Do we have a seconder on that one? I'm okay moving with at this point, the restriction on the proving of septic. The other one, I think takes us into a line where we're going to get rejected.
Okay, if there's no other appetite, I'd take that as a friendly amendment.
I would certainly do that. And why I feel okay about doing it is because the fact that Airbnb started with 3 air mattresses, I believe the ingenuity of entrepreneurs will work through this. And as a municipality, we have the boring job to use gray felt pens.
Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would just like to register before that vote goes that from a staff perspective, we would strongly recommend keeping in, not mandatory, but septic inspections where they seem to be appropriate. And that would be primarily increases to the numbers of dwelling units, increases where that would, or if there's a new septic going to be installed for someone coming in and saying, I'm building this, what can I do? We strongly recommend it. The intent is not to take a heavy hand. The intent is to protect the community. And by the time a septic system is in failure, if it's been allowed to go ahead, the thing is running, then it's very challenging then to say, oh, now you must cease operations, even though you were legal. You must cease operations because your septic system is failing. And by then it turns it into a massive problem in the community. I think we heard you, Councillor Herring, loud and clear. Don't be heavy-handed. It shouldn't be mandatory on every single one doing it. Use your reasonableness. And that's where staff would like to go with it. Council has the discretion, of course, to modify the rules. That is your job as council. But from the advice of staff, that is problematic. On the issue of what type of structures, as my colleague Mr. Prime referred to already, the province is the one who's saying these are the type of structures we'll allow. So if we're to say, oh yeah, build this, and the province still shuts them down, that makes us look like, A, we don't know what we're doing, or we're not providing the advice we should be providing to people building. If they say, oh, well, staff said I could go ahead and build a yurt here and it would meet all the qualifications, and then the province says, whoa, that doesn't meet the qualifications. I think it makes us look like we're not doing our job appropriately. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Frizzle.
On that note with the septic tank, my personal feeling is that we are helping the operators by making sure that their septic tank is working. I hate to think that we're going to just allow septic fumes to come through because we don't want to do an inspection or tell them that something needs to be done.
And to that point, and to staff's point, it's discretionary on
Yes,
staff's point.
yeah, and it
for the
is
most part.
discretionary.
And I think, if it's if it's an operation that's been going on for years and years,
No problem.
and there hasn't been an issue and they're not expanding, I mean, I think that's a fair pass for staff to make. And I think that's sort of where it goes. And then we go from there to expansion, which is a whole other conversation. And having done this regulation with the government of BC related to campgrounds, I've been there. So, okay, you moved. Do we have a seconder on that version? Because if so, we would have to vote on that one and pass or fail it with the modification on saying no absolutely to septic, or we can move back to removing the recommendation as presented by staff.
I think that, because I'm with you on this one, however, I appreciate staff's comments. And the other thing that I think is interesting is that, where does it go when septic systems do fail? And I do look at, properties, especially large resort properties that are not on district systems. And how does that, does that change anything with that? Just your thoughts on it.
I think that would be dependent on the property. I don't think it's related to this issue.
Okay.
Is it an issue in the community? Potentially, yeah, absolutely.
On a commercial property, Interior Health would also step in a way.
That's a really good point. I appreciate that, Lance.
Yeah,
Thank you.
That is occurred here.
As well as the Ministry of Environment, which has been involved in
That
some
has occurred
resorts
here too
in the
as well.
municipality.
This is a good conversation.
Yes. Okay, so I'm not hearing that you seconded.
No, because I do value staff's thing, and I will trust that there will be the fair and reasonable lens. And if it proves otherwise, it will come to council, and then it will change again. But I do appreciate, and I also note that it's recorded. So we all are in agreement in that way forward. But the principle of it is watching for the overstretch and reach. So I will regretfully not support you, but indirectly support
So
you.
does somebody want to move recommendation 1 as presented?
I do.
Moved by Councillor Bratton, seconded by presented, Councillor Matheson. I dare to say this, but further discussion. If not, all those in favor? Can we pass that?
Sorry, Mayor Blackwell, we need to read the bylaw there.
Oh, sorry, yeah, okay. District of Clearwater bylaw number 334, 2026, a bylaw to provide for alternate means of publishing. That's not the one. Where's the one? What page is it on?
63.
63, 76, 62, 63. I got it. Took a bit. 63. District of Clearwater bylaw number 333, bylaw to amend the District of Clearwater Development Procedures bylaw number 118, 2014, the District of Clearwater Businesses Licensing and Regulation bylaw number 124, 2014, and the District of Clearwater Municipal Ticket Information bylaw number 221, 2019, in relation to short-term rentals. Whereas Council wishes to establish a clear local regulatory framework for short-term rentals under the district's existing land use, business licensing, and enforcement powers, and whereas Council has adopted an official community plan that provides for the consideration of temporary uses within the district, and whereas the Council wishes to delegate issuance of certain temporary use permits for short-term rentals, establish application procedures and fees, create a business licensing regime for short-term rentals, including a provisional licensing option while a required temporary use permit application is being processed, and strengthen the related enforcement tools. Therefore, the Council of the District of Clearwater in open meeting assembles and acts as follows. This bylaw may be cited for all purposes as the District of Clearwater Short-Term Rental Regulations and Enforcement Amendment Bylaw number 333, 2026. All those in favor? Opposed? Noted opposed, Councillor Herring. Move on to recommendation 2. That the District of Clearwater Short-Term Regulations and Enforcement Amendment Bylaw number 333 be read for a third time. You're moving that, Councillor Frizzle, seconded by Councillor McKenzie. District of Clearwater Bylaw number 333, 2026, a bylaw to amend the District of Clearwater Development Procedures Bylaw number 118, 2014, the District of Clearwater Businesses Licensing and Regulation Bylaw number 124, 2014, and the District of Clearwater Municipal Ticket Information Bylaw number 221, 2019, in relation to short-term rentals. Whereas the Council wishes to establish a clear local regulatory framework for short-term rentals under the district's existing land use, business licensing, and enforcement powers. And whereas Council has adopted an official community plan that provides consideration of temporary uses within the district, and whereas Council wishes to delegate issuance of certain temporary use permits for short-term rentals, establish application procedures and fees, create a business license regime for short-term rentals, including a provisional licensing option, required temporary use permit application is being processed, and strengthen related enforcement tools. Now therefore, the Council of the District in Clearwater, an open meeting assembles and acts as follows. This bylaw may be cited for all purposes as the District of Clearwater Short-Term Rental Regulations and Enforcement Amendment Bylaw number 333, 2026. All those in favor? And opposed? Councillor Herring opposes. Then we move on to recommendation 3, which is the public notice bylaw number 334. This is the one that relates to allowing us to use Facebook, our website, and other platforms. And you have a question, Councillor Sim.
Just a question on this. Are these also posted in the foyer of the DOC?
Councillor Sim, through the mayor, yes, they are.
Okay, thank you.
That's also, by the way, practice at the TNRD. So, good. Does somebody want to move recommendation 3?
Second.
Seconded by Councillor Sim. District of Clearwater bylaw number 334, 2026, a bylaw to provide for an alternative means of publishing public notice. Whereas section 94.2 of the community charter authorizes the council by bylaw to provide alternative means of publishing a notice instead of publishing the notice in a newspaper in accordance with sections 94.1, 1A and B of the community charter. And whereas the public notice regulation BC Reg 52 2022 requires that before adopting a bylaw under section 94.2 of the community charter, councils consider whether the proposed means of publication are reliable, suitable, and accessible. And whereas council has considered the District of Clearwater website and the District of Clearwater official Facebook pages and considers them to be reliable, suitable, and accessible means of publication for the purposes of section 94.2 of the community charter. Now therefore, the council of the District of Clearwater in open meeting assembles and acts as follows. This bylaw may be cited for all purposes as the District of Clearwater Public Notice Bylaw number 334, 2026. All those in favor? And that passes. And the recommendation 4 is to read this for a third time. Do I have a mover and a seconder on that? Moved by Councillor Matheson, seconded by, somebody put your hand in the air. Thank you, Councillor Bratton. That's not a short joke. District of Clearwater bylaw number 334, 2026, a bylaw to provide for alternative means of publishing public notice, whereas section 94.2 of the community charter authorizes the council by bylaw to provide for alternative means of publishing a notice instead of publishing the notice in a newspaper in accordance with section 94.1A and B of the community charter. And whereas the public notice regulation BC Reg 52 2022 requires that before adopting a bylaw under section 94.2 of the community charter, council consider whether the proposed means of publication are reliable, suitable, and accessible. And whereas council has considered the District of Clearwater website and the District of Clearwater official Facebook page and considers them to be reliable, suitable, and accessible means of publication for the purpose of section 94.2 of the community charter. Now therefore, the council of the District of Clearwater in open meeting assembles and acts as follows. This bylaw may be cited for all purposes as the District of Clearwater Public Notice Bylaw number 334, 2026. All those in favor? And that is read for a third time. And then we have recommendation 5, that council adopt the District of Clearwater short-term rental temporary use permit policy substantially in the form attached, which is page
79.
79. Thank you. So there is no bylaw with this, it is just passing this permit policy, because this is a policy, not a bylaw.
Correct, Mayor Blackwell. It's a policy of council.
Yeah. I don't have to read anything, people just have to move and second this, but it is on page 79.
Just a question. The business license inspector would be deemed as,
I believe the last person appointed as a business license inspector was myself.
okay, and I'm just checking because then there's a delegated officer, which is the CAO or corporate officer. So I'm just making sure that we need the two, or how that's specified.
That's correct. Under the definitions on page 82, a delegated officer means the CAO, corporate officer, or business license inspector, if they're not all, the same person, where, in a sense.
Okay, I guess I'm just trying to understand the business license inspector does not have the meaning that the delegated officer has. Is that a big deal or no?
Sorry, they do have the meaning of a delegated officer at the very top of page 82.
Well, what's the difference between a delegated officer and a business license inspector?
A business license inspector is a position that's appointed. The delegated officer is only in regards to this bylaw, as in who's delegated to enforce this policy and the bylaws that were accompanying it. A delegated officer is not a statutory position or anything of that nature. It's just defining it in this bylaw as to who is delegated to administer the policy.
I still don't understand who the business license inspector is. Does anybody else?
The business license inspector is currently also our director of corporate services. It wouldn't always be that way if we had that business license inspector could be assigned to another person if we brought someone in who is dealing with bylaws or whatever, right? In the current structure, it's Mr. Prime.
So at this point, in that case, who would, it's a delegated person, so who would do the delegating of that person? Would it be the business license officer, or would that come to council to say we are delegating another person for this role? Does that make sense?
Can you clarify the question, please?
I don't
Mr.
know if
Mayor?
I can.
Oh.
I get a button.
Only I could.
I get a button.
Is there a question in there?
Okay, so back to the beginning.
No, I just want to understand. The reason being is because I always get a little nervous around business license inspectors because I have a phobia about inspectors. And just how it's different than the delegated officer and why they're not combined. Or I may be making too much out of this, but you always have to look downstream for unintended consequences.
The business license inspector is a title that's assigned in the business licensing and regulation bylaw.
Thank
So
you.
that's where that term comes from.
Okay, that all makes sense now. Got it.
I withdraw my question. Does somebody wish to move recommendation 5 that council adopt the District of Clearwater short-term rental temporary use permit policy essentially in the form attached?
No, I want to ask one more question.
Can I ask one more question? And then
So if it is not voted today, and the only reason I ask this is because so much has been done on this work. So if we don't vote it, do you think that there would be something that might be missed in this, or you feel really rock solid that this is a good path forward? We're making a lot of changes today.
Yes, and I certainly do appreciate that this is a blitz of information that, council only received really on Wednesday last week, that staff have been, only really started working on this 2.5 weeks ago, but really spent an inordinate amount of time over the Easter weekend researching, getting the right information, and preparing these, bylaw amendments. So I understand that, the concern for any gaps. However, I do feel rock solid about where this is at.
Okay, and so by not moving it forward, if this was not moved forward, would it create delays for our operators?
Yes.
Yes,
That's
absolutely.
okay.
Yeah. Okay. Mr. Johnson, not wanting to draw this out any further, but go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So because this is a policy, if there was something where we found that doesn't work, council has the ability to change policies easier than changing a bylaw, right?
We don't have to go reread and amend. We just change the policy. On that point, does somebody wish to move? Thank you. Seconded by, please, Councillor Bratton, hand in the air like she cares. The recommendation that the council adopt District of Clearwater short-term rental temporary use policy substantially in the form attached. Further discussion? If not, all those in favor? Thank you.
Opposed?
Opposed. There we go. Noted opposed. Sorry, my peripheral vision's gone to hell. Okay, we did have a late item, which is 16.4. I note that Ms. Campbell.
Mayor Blackwell, just one more thing. I do notice that as well, we've been sitting here, Tourism Wells Grays announced their AGM on the 24th of April.
Yeah.
Is anybody from staff attending that if there's questions about this new policy and the direction?
I will be presenting at the meeting following that.
I'm just wondering at the AGM.
I can attend.
Well, I'm not saying we were invited, but I just wanted to.
That's something Tourism Wells Gray would like. I'll talk with Claire and
I just want to link the opportunity together because they are having an AGM. It will be populated, and I'm just throwing it out there as that opportunity to.
If you would like to walk into the Dragon's Den, feel free to do so, Mr. Prime.
I do have a thick skin, and if Tourism Wells Gray would like me to attend and try and answer questions as best to the operators as best as possible, I would be happy to.
Okay. Okay. On to the late item, Ms. Campbell and staff, Etsy grant application for economic development roadmap, which is the document on table.
Are you still with us, Jenna?
Hi, thanks. Good afternoon, Your Worship and members of council. Yes, today I will be presenting a staff report regarding grant application for a small scale project with ETSI-BC. The project here, document in front of you, is for the Clearwater Economic Development Roadmap. This is a project that we're looking at to address the gap that the district has with being able to provide some action steps. So we're looking to get a grant for $25,000 from ETSI-BC. This would be fully funded by ETSI-BC. As far as the history here, the District of Clearwater has completed already 2 foundational economic development planning documents, including the Community Economic Development Assessment in 2019 and an Economic Development Strategy in 2021. These studies, they were able to identify some of our key opportunities for tourism, business development, and economic diversification, but we have not seen anything moving forward to advance implementing any of these due to just some of the limited capacity, as well as some of our changing economic conditions within our community. As a result, we're uncertain about next steps that community could action. The hope with this project is that we could address that gap, and the district would be seeking then this external funding to retain a consultant to assist in developing a very clear and action-oriented development roadmap that would guide our community with investment and growth decisions over the next 1 to 3 years. So with this project, we are looking to directly build on some of the other assessments and strategies that we have, while looking to update some of our plans that are more reflective of the current conditions and translating that into recommending what sort of prioritized action steps we can have. The project, we are looking to have a consultant with experience in both economic development and stakeholder engagement to conduct more of a comprehensive review of our current documents, as well as facilitating engagement with local businesses, tourism operators, community members, council, SIM, First Nations, and our regional partners. So that way we can have a action-ready roadmap. The District of Clearwater is applying for the ETSI-BC small scale project stream that is under the economic development capacity. The project itself will be able to review what we currently have and engaging with council to determine what your current priorities and initiatives are, as well as conducting stakeholder engagements with all of our community partners, so that everyone is involved. This would also help to develop a prioritized set of initiatives with action steps, as well as timelines, estimated costs, and as well as any potential funding sources that we would need to complete any of the projects that are identified. We're hoping that this would also identify some of our quick win opportunities that we currently have in the community to develop these concepts for action ready and funding prior to moving anything major forward. Now, this project is set to run from August 1st of 2026 until March 31st of 2027, also allowing this council, as well as the elected council in October, to have some input, as well as making sure that we can address all of the community when considering what sort of plans and direction that we're wanting to go. Financially, the district is not looking to put up any funding contributions at this time. This would be fully funded from ETSI-BC grant in a total of $25,000. The staff, if this is an approved application, this staff will be communicating this to the community through all of our regular communication channels, including our website, social media platforms, and the community newsletter. The community and stakeholder engagement is a very much a core component of this project itself, in making sure that everyone's concerns and ideas are heard. So the consultant then would be able to facilitate engagement sessions with everyone throughout local businesses, our community members, tourism operators, First Nations, as well as any of our regional partners. This kind of activity will provide a lot of opportunities for our public to contribute, as well as to stay informed through this process and providing us with a clear roadmap for where we're headed in the future. Happy to take any questions that you have about this project.
Okay. Any questions, comments from staff? Councillor Herring first.
I think like what I'm seeing here is awesome. I do think there's a lot of substantial crossover with what we heard earlier from the Chamber's application in terms of like the pieces of work getting done. I wonder, is there an opportunity to collaborate between the Chamber of Commerce and the district on this? For example, having the Chamber of Commerce apply for the areas surrounding Clearwater, pooling it with resources within Clearwater, and then we've got 2 grants going to the same maybe consultant who can collaborate between the 2 groups. I'm just seeing some opportunities to align and maybe make this work fit with the Chamber of Commerce.
Anybody want to take a shot at that? Go ahead, Mr. Johnson.
Thank you. So I think that possibility does exist if both the chamber and ourselves were to get a grant. You're right, there is some similarity. Jenna and I have been talking about this grant for a while, and she's been working on it. We already put it in for the grant, but we thought with the grant from the chamber coming forward, it was important to put this in front of council right away. So you see, we're working kind of along the same tack for the type of project it is, which is a relatively small dollar consulting type project. It's one of the few areas where it makes sense. So potential to, if we were both successful with a grant, to work together, I think there is, and it potentially I think that would be more at probably the consulting level, having those 2 organizations, whoever those consultants selected were. Usually that's a fairly small pool of eligible consultants anyways. The focus of whether this is in the municipality versus a chamber grant being outside, that would be kind of a logical breakdown, I think. I think you're exactly right. So I think it would depend if that grant is, if either one of our grants are successful, and then if both grants are successful, it's a conversation which should happen anyways. Can I guarantee that we could work out a working arrangement? What would make that possible? That remains to be seen, but it would be a conversation worth having.
Thank you for that question. Further thoughts or questions? So,
just one, sorry. First of all, Jenna, it's so nice to hear from you. You certainly are missed, and we hope you're doing well. Thank you very much for all your work on this, and it's just an extension of gratitude to have come up with this. And I do hope that in line with this, did you also factor in the growing importance of remote workers and that economic power that they do bring to community?
Through your worship, Councillor Sim, we have considered all of those components that are going to need to be considered on how it is that we can address bringing in and enticing more people to move to the community and what that looks like from an economics side. So all of that we're hoping to be able to consider with having that consultant come in to do some of this work.
Okay, thank you. And the reason being is because you mentioned community members, but sometimes remote workers don't see themselves just as community, and yet I think that they're a really important part of our economic environment here in Clearwater.
Yeah. Mr. Johnson, do you want to add to that?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just one other small point. It's, while this is kind of focused on what are the existing plans that have been developed, what are the good ideas, and how do we move those forward, I think there's been some discussion recently about whether we need to incorporate some type of a round table to get more community input. And this potentially could be a vehicle for at least not a extended committee type process, but for a round table to see, are there ideas out there that we haven't paid enough focus to, right? So that could be one of the requirements that we build into the work plan for the consultant on this as well.
Yeah, and I think that's a great idea, and I think Councillor Sim and others have suggested an economic development roundtable, a meeting, which could eventually evolve back into a committee post-election, but at this point, a roundtable lunch, that and other topics definitely could fit in there.
And I think that that's a great lens, and certainly just round tables. We haven't really done that since before COVID. Much has changed, but what I found really interesting is when the minister came to visit us here in Clearwater, and just the intentional lens of the BC government to look at remote workers as having a larger talent pool. So I think just knowing that that is the direction of the provincial government. Do you remember that? What was her name? She was here. We gave her cinnamon buns.
Brittany Anderson.
Brittany Anderson. I mean, that was one of the things that they identified as working for the province. And so to bring that and to bring that that section to a round table, I think it's just going to be a wealth of information.
And that was absolutely the pitch we made to the MP last week as well, along supporting that, Frank Caputo. So there's recommendation to receive
So
this
moved.
report. Thank you. Seconded by Councillor McKenzie. All those in favor? We're not making a decision. This has already been submitted. Thank you. I think, are we willing to take it's 4:01. Can we take a 4:10 break before we get into Ms. Klassen's next report, which is page 121, which is financial plan. Okay, and we were back in session. First thing we need to do is make a resolution to extend the council meeting beyond 4:30 because we are going to be beyond 4:30. So, can I get somebody to move and second that against your personal wishes?
Yeah.
Moved by Councillor Bratton, seconded by Councillor Herring. All those in the room right now in favor. Thank you. Councillor Frizzle noted as opposed to extending the meeting. With that, and thank you for all the work to staff on that last section. It is mental gymnastics. We will move into item 17.1 bylaws, and I believe Ms. Clausen is going to speak to this. Let the pain begin. Oh, sorry. Let the presentation begin.
Thank you, Mayor Blackwell and council. I am excited to present to you the 2026 to 2030 financial plan bylaw for the first 3 readings. I'm only going to have a quick verbal report, no presentation. I just wanted to highlight that the last changes council approved are included in the financial plan. I'm just going to remind you what they were. We had a special project for the zoning bylaw was moved up from 2027 to 2026 for $65,000, and it will be funded from unrestricted surplus. We had a special project for the canoe regatta. We moved it from 2026 to 2027 for $10,000. And the special project, we removed one. It was called Connecting Clearwater Wayfinding Signage Project. The grant was unsuccessful, so we eliminated that project. The highlights for this financial plan, capital projects for 2026 is $5.7 million with 82% or $4.6 million funded from grants. Special projects is a total of $1.5 million with $65,000 or $942,000 funded by grants. The net impact to reserves and surpluses is a net decrease of $500,000. We're contributing $1.5 million in reserves and distributing $2 million to projects and operating. Revenue generated from taxation is 9.52% higher than 2025 for a total of $3.9 million. Revenue from taxation and sales of service represents 46% of all revenue. Revenue from grants and transfers from reserves is 49% of all revenue. The estimated change in property tax for the average residential and business other classes will be about 11%. And this plan meets the objectives of consistency property tax distribution among the BC assessment property classes. Next steps for this process, we're going to calculate and prepare the 2026 tax rate bylaw for council to approve in the next few meetings. We're going to finalize our staff will be finalizing all reporting and postings of reports, finalizing the audit financial statements, complete all reporting to the province by May 15th, which includes all the bylaws that were talked about, the audited financial statements and additional reporting, and finally complete this summary of financial information by June 30th. Any questions?
Any questions? Does anybody want to move recommendation 1? So this is cleaning things up. So recommendation 1 is that the District of Clearwater bylaw number 332 2026 to 2030 5-year financial plan be introduced and read for a first and second time. But if you need time for questions, no.
Oh.
Are you
Oh, you're gonna move. Oh, you were gonna say. I was just gonna say that I appreciate the work that went into this. It was not particularly easy, but I think just with the lens of looking at what is it, the economic security financial. What's the fund name? It's where we put money in for against any shocks.
Shock absorber fund.
The financial
stability reserve.
which I think is a really prudent part of this budget, and it has meant some stretching and certainly some reductions. But I do think that it is buffering the district for the future, and I do appreciate the tax implications for it. But it will possibly be better in the future because of this proactive measure.
Thank you. So we had a mover and a seconder here, did we? Who had moved it? Okay, moved by Councillor Frizzle, seconded by Councillor Herring. District of Clearwater, 2026 to 2030 5-year financial plan, bylaw number 332, 2026, a bylaw to adopt the 2026 to 2030 5-year financial plan. Whereas section 165 of the community charter requires that council shall adopt a 5-year financial plan. Now, therefore, the council of the District of Clearwater in open meeting assembles and acts as follows. This bylaw may be cited as District of Clearwater bylaw number 332, 2026, 2026 to 2030 5-year financial plan. All those in favor? And that passes. And then the last one is recommendation 2, that this be given a third reading. Moved by Councillor McKenzie, seconded by Councillor Bratton. Hand in the air. District of Clearwater 2026-2030 5-year financial plan, bylaw number 332, 2026. A bylaw to adopt the 2026 to 2030 5-year financial plan, whereas section 165 of the community charter requires that council shall adopt a 5-year financial plan. Now therefore, the council of the District of Clearwater in open meeting assembles and acts as follows. This bylaw may be cited as the District of Clearwater bylaw number 332, 2026, 2026 to 2030 5-year financial plan. All those in favor? And that passes. There is one response requested correspondence from the Chamber of Commerce, which is the second letter, which is a follow-up to the first letter. If anybody would like to speak to that.
And I believe, sorry, Mr. Mayor, that we're bringing this back at the next council meeting as part of the delegation, which is.
So this comes back at the delegation for
Correct.
the next thing anyways, so,
Yeah.
okay, so the response is that we're bringing this to the next meeting. Okay, thank you. Now we move on to Councillor Herring's notice of motion. You can speak to it.
Yeah, I was surprised to see it come back. I understood that there was a legal reason to bring it back, but I'm pleased to see it back, for sure. So, yeah, is there something you want to clarify there?
Thank you. Just for clarification, there's a legal reason why we couldn't bring the voting back where the council turned down council voted against approving the DCC amendment. So we couldn't bring that decision back because we missed the time frame for the reconsideration process. But as far as the ability to say council would like to look at these things, council still has that ability to do that.
Okay. Thank you. So, I guess I've spoken extensively about my approach here and why I'd like to review some other options for DCCs. I think you guys all have a good handle on that. I think the one plug I just want to put in is I looked at that OCP and I looked at the amount of housing we need to build in the next 5 years, in the next 10 years, and then over the next 20, and looked at what we've done over the last 5 years, the last 10 years, and I think we're going to need a concerted effort to get single-family homes built, and that's going to involve, I think, really targeted strategy towards that kind of building. I think this is one component of that. Hearing in the update earlier today about the developers meeting not to happen kind of thing, that's another example. I just think we need to be pushing forward, because if we want to get these units built, and these are standalone family dwellings, not apartment buildings, not low-income housing, but the missing middle pieces, I think we need to be targeted. I don't think it's going to accidentally happen. I don't think it's going to evolve naturally, because I think right now it is hard to build a house. And so whatever we can do on our end to make it easier to build a house is worth doing, and we got to hope that the province is going to be on the same page doing their share as well. But I think we have a share to play, and I think DCCs are a big part of our share to play. So I'd like to see some options about how we could fund infrastructure, but also how we can work together with our developers about the collection, as it says here. So I'll leave it at that, and that's my note.
Are you going to move it for moving forward, Mr. Johnson?
That's
Okay,
correct.
So you need a seconder. Does somebody want to second this?
I'll second.
Okay, so discussion on this. Yeah, and I hear you on most of this. I think our best bets right now are a couple of things. Now that the federal Liberal Party has gained itself a slim majority and has made this deal with Ontario, I think on the DCC issue, that Minister Boyle for the province of BC is already in negotiations to try to get the same deal, which would have DCCs. That's one thing that would be useful. I think the conversation that we had with the MP around pushing that one great project, I think that's another thing that would be useful, and I really hope that he can get some headway on that. And in talking to, I believe, the CAO and somebody else, this is actually, what he's doing has actually been a successful way of doing things for other areas, to not try to do the broad spectrum, but to pick those single items that can make such a big difference, and to the point of $1.2 million. I think that would also knock out the bottom on some of the costs that we would be requiring developers to move forward. Timing of collection, I think we're already at the simple one, which is at time of building permit, are we not? Which is actually the simplest, least costly one for developers at this point. So I'm not going to support the motion because there's too many other factors, including I would really like to see where Barrier lands on their DCC, so we have one more local modern comparable. Barrier is being very progressive right now, so I would like to see where that goes. But further comments, questions? Oh, sorry, Councillor.
Again, a demotion.
Councillor McKenzie was pointing in a direction at Councillor Sim, which was ricocheting over at Mr. Johnson. So CAO Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I'm not sure you referred to it, Mr. Mayor, about the deal that Ontario has made with the federal government. Is council aware of what that deal was? So that deal was, and it's the news release is from March 30th of this year, so it's pretty minty fresh. But so there's a shared commitment that between the federal government and the provincial government, they would reduce DCCs at the municipal level. So the strategy around that is and I believe, well, the number they put in here is a reduction of 50% of municipal DCCs, with the proviso that the higher levels of government reimburse the municipalities for those lost DCCs, because they recognize DCCs are critical to getting infrastructure done, right? So it is my understanding as well that BC is in some conversations with the federal government over this. If that is the case, that's a very potentially significant amount of relief which could happen. And it would make sense to kind of, I believe, wait to see what the outcome of this is before we start on another, I guess, DCC project to consider DCCs again. The other factor, and I say this respectfully, but on DCCs we had the last DCC go round, 3 open houses. We had a council presentation on October 15th of 2024. November 19th of 2024, November 25th of 2025, December 2nd of 2025, and January 13th of 2026. Oh, sorry, plus another workshop on October 15th, 2024. So I think, and again, I'm respectful because DCCs are a very challenging topic. They're one of the more challenging topics we deal with. But with that period of time, creeping up on, a year and 3/4, I guess, council should have been able to get the questions they needed answered in that period of time. So I don't know that restarting it with a big pile of questions, I'm not sure that we can finish it before we get to the election and we start to down tools over stuff. But but that's a fairly significant amount of work in the in this notice of motion. That's not a simple just bring this one consideration back. It's quite a complex bit of work, and I think we're better off waiting till we got a clear field ahead of us to try to hit DCCs again. Thank you.
Councillor Herring.
Yeah, just in response to that, I want to say, like, we've spent a tremendous amount of time discussing it, particularly with our consultants who did a huge amount of input from council, and they still delivered a report that failed to pass a council vote, right? So to me, there is one side of that that's like, oh, it's a difficult issue. There's another side of that we got a subpar, deal from our contractor. As far as I'm concerned, we got a product that was not workable. They did not listen to the room well enough to present a package that could pass the room. So to me, that's a failing on behalf of the contractor we used for that project. I think, I see your point that there's a regulatory environment that's changing, that we're looking at potential changes to how DCCs could look across the board. I ran on this in the last election 4 years ago. I've been banging this drum the whole time, unceasingly, and we've had these conversations. So to me, I'm like, I get that it's hard to get there, but I don't understand why we weren't there 4 years ago. I'm working on this for a reason, because I believe this is an obstacle to growth in our community. Not the only obstacle, of course, but it is an obstacle. And so to me, this was bringing this forward in that context.
Thank you. Councillor Sim.
Just a question for staff. Did you feel with the report or the that was brought forward that the municipal assist factor was highlighted enough?
My understanding of DCCs is it's fundamental to the calculation of DCCs is the municipal assist factor. I haven't gone through and reviewed the actual council reports from prior to when I was engaged with the district, but that's a fundamental conversation what has to happen, because it's required by law, the municipal assist factor. Not sure if we have a bit of history that I believe it was in 2021, there was a DCC attempt at that point in time to get them through with a suggested municipal assist factor of 30%. And my understanding is at the time the inspector of municipalities said, that's too high, you're placing too much of a burden on the rest of the existing tax base, not enough on development. So that municipal assist factor is a pretty key factor, but I believe it's being talked about all along. The other thing with DCCs to take into consideration, that is only one of the factors what reduces the cost to the developers. Is municipal assist factor is one, but also the proportion of the new infrastructure that will be attributable to development. So for example, if you have a water main that is new infrastructure needed, but it's going to serve your existing community, you take the percentage which is going to serve your existing community and you take it right out of the DCC calculations. It's only the upsizing needed for the new development, and it's not called municipal assist factor, but the two things act as the same thing of reducing what that amount. But what is talked about all along, those two things are key building blocks to determining your DCC rates.
Yeah, and supplemental to that would be that, in reading the reports and in reading the reports that was put forward by, a previous contractor and coming forward, I found it to be a little more understandable for the uniqueness of Clearwater. I will support what Councillor Herring said, and perhaps maybe what was missed in that is to have a separate workshop where it was just council being able to have some of the information translated through someone like yourself as the CAO with lots of experience. There was not that freedom, and I will say from my personal perspective is I felt that it was a right or wrong as opposed to how do we get to resolution. The other thing that I felt that was missing, which we now have, is very clear-cut guidelines of things that are projects that are in the budget that weren't necessarily as clearly identified it is now, for the assurance of our developers and what that DCC was. It seemed a bit ingenuous to be able to vote on DCCs when it didn't see that the district had been firmly planted in wherever they were going. So I think there was some timing issues, which is why looking at this evaluation, and maybe it can be slow rolled as we look at what the new landscapes for provincial and federal governments would be. So I feel unresolved with it, with how it went. I share some of the sentiments, and I think that, you know, growth is funded by DCCs. I'm not sure that that's a modern philosophy that's going to work for Clearwater and how we land on something that's maybe more mutually beneficial.
Further thoughts, comments? Councillor Mackenzie.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we've witnessed Councillor Herring be passionate about this for the better part of the last 2 terms. You say beating that drum. I gotta agree with you. As much as it seems like it's the right way to go about things, deep down inside, even though I don't speak about it, I feel it's been detrimental to development in town. Just one man's opinion. I do think it's hampered us over the years. And, you know, thinking with the government that's come ahead with these DCCs, it sounds great, but until, my opinion anyways, until we see it in action, I'm taking it like a grain of salt. Until we see something happen with that. On the other hand, with the housing needs assessment we've had, and they speak of the amount of houses we've needed, I haven't seen that many houses in 40 years. So just one mine coming in is not going to bring, I don't feel, the need for 430 or whatever the number of houses exactly it was. It sounds good, but I'm here to, as a witness that's lived it as well as many others here. You know, there hasn't been that many since the 80s built here. A couple booms, and then things kind of settle down. And, you know, we've seen not that many built in the last, well, say since we've been in council. So yeah, like I said, I do like the idea behind this. I will support Councillor Herring's motion on that. Just, I would be curious to see more info on it. I don't want to be the guy that causes more work, but there are some things I would like to see about that, other options a way around that. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you for those comments. Yeah, my feeling at this point is, even with this report, I don't think we have enough time to deal with it before this term ends, but that's just part of the question. Further comments or discussions? If not, I'll call the question. All in favor of the notice of motion? Opposed? So that's you're against or for? You're not against. So at this particular point, the motion passes. Okay, we're gonna call this one again.
Councillor Matheson is here now too.
So on Council Herring's notice of motion, all those in favor? Opposed? And it passes. There you go. Comments, questions from the public? Oh, sorry.
To follow up on this one, then I will put this out to consultants to take a look at this, because this is a big package of work.
Yeah.
Bring a budget amendment back to council for consideration.
Okay, thank you. Comments from the questions? Annabelle, you had a thought, question?
Okay, in May 12th, May 26th is regular council meetings. There's 2. Is it gonna be 2 o'clock, or is it still gonna be 1 o'clock?
It'll be 1 o'clock. 1 o'clock for all future council meetings. We got a lot of work to do. Further?
I just have a comment.
Yeah.
On behalf of seniors that do not have any internet in their homes and the like, which I actually have several that told me, I go, what the hell's going on, Cheryl? And so it takes me like an hour a day with this one and that one. By not putting these things in the newspaper, you have sufficient.
Hold on. We're still putting things in the newspaper.
No, you said the community newsletter, you said the website, and you said but you didn't say the newspaper, the Times.
No, I believe we're still putting, I think the provincial requirement still requires us to put it in the newspaper available.
So let's clarify this. The minimum standard, we've changed the minimum standard to the district website and the district Facebook page. That doesn't stop us from additional posting, including the newspaper.
Yeah.
And that's going to be discretionary based on, what the item that we're bringing forward. The purpose for that, for like especially the TUP process, is
Yeah.
you don't want to have to spend $1,200
Per TUP.
TUP. Otherwise, that cost is
Yeah.
going to be passed
But
on
there's
to the
still
operator.
there's still some opportunities there listing multiple TUPs. Refer to the website potentially and those sort of things, but it wouldn't be the official ad or whatever. So,
Exactly.
yeah. Okay. Okay. Yeah. We can't spend $36,000 on 30 TUPs.
They don't care about
Yeah.
upbuilding, I'm sure, but
Yeah.
they do care about whether or not
Yeah.
the building is.
Yeah. This just helps us get it out quicker. Further questions or comments? If not, motion to adjourn for the love of God. Moved by Councilor McKenzie, seconded by Councilor Fritzl. All in favor? We're done. Thank you, people. That was a long and productive.